is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Jonah, how about I introduce you so you can introduce the topic? How you feel about that?
Sure. I think people know who I am. I think we should introduce Gianmarco. We tricked him to come up here.
Look at this saucy Italian face right here.
People know who I am.
What's Gianmarco? What's going on, man?
Everything good. Everything good. I came here to moderate. I don't want to interfere. I just want to make sure you guys don't interrupt each other because it's been happening.
Guys, real quick, I just want to say you guys don't know who Gianmarco is. He is the brains behind this entire operation. He does all of the edits. So first off, please, if you're watching this in the comments, say thank you so much, Gianmarco. None of this would be possible without him. I've been wanting to do a public thank you to him for a while. He's an awesome dude. He gives us ideas of what to talk about. So please, if you're watching this, comment, be like, we love you, Gianmarco, because he really is. Like, me and Quijano would just be yelling at each other to do shit, and nothing would ever get done without Gianmarco. So I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you, bro. Thank you for making this possible.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, that is 1,000% true. He makes all the magic happen. My memes and reels don't look like absolute trash because of this guy. Yvonne, thanks you for putting up with us. She puts up with me. So she is more than qualified.
Yvonne, you are a trooper. We don't know how you do it. We're still aghast.
I don't know how she does it. We'll make it a whole podcast one day. But also, if you guys have seen on our social media or for the cover for this picture, that graphic.
Oh, that was so funny.
Yeah, that was amazing.
About this podcast. Yo, shout out to
I laughed out loud when I saw that. I was like, that is beautiful. Is that the cover? Is that the thumbnail for this video, Gianmarco?
Yes. Yep.
Very beautiful.
Has to be.
I love it.
Yeah,
okay,
it's
cool.
gonna be good too. Okay. Guys, we're okay. So let's do this. Let's do this. I'm excited about tonight. So just for context, when you guys know we started this podcast, we wanted to cover a lot of different topics. We wanted to touch on a lot of different things. I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. What do you think?
We've done a great job.
I think we're
doing great. I really like what this podcast has evolved into. But dum. Gotcha.
Maybe it's because we created it that way. I don't know. Right? I hope you guys are picking up what we're putting down here because we're trying to make this thing so special. We talked about politics, but today we're talking about God versus science. Is the theory of evolution a real thing? I think that today's podcast is going to be fun. If you guys saw my story, I do think that Jonah came here with the impression that this is just obvious and maybe I'm a little bit silly for even questioning it. Yeah, a little bit. Tell the truth. A little bit. Is that a little bit?
A little bit. I mean, obvious, dude, I think all of your beliefs are fucking crazy, but I'm here to hear it out.
That makes sense. I mean, and you definitely are the representation of balanced, well-rounded perspective.
Oh, 100%. Fair and balanced here. You know how it
is. Fair and balanced. But today's going to be good, guys. Just for a little bit of context, I don't really know how this is going to go. We've kind of gone back and forth. I think that Jonah's assumptions about how simple this is going to be may change out the direction. I genuinely don't know. I just want to have a good conversation.
We'll see.
We'll see. For context, guys, I don't know that this is going to be a creationist versus evolution argument. I think that both of those are such big topics that it would be doing either one a disservice to try to battle them out within the course of the time frame that's allotted for this podcast. So today is going to be primarily focused on evolution. Now, for me, I think I'm going to have to, for the sake of some of my arguments or the things that I'm going to be presenting, reference and refer to intelligent design. But not for the sake of necessarily defending the argument, but for the sake of providing context to the argument that I have as it relates to evolution. It's going to be a fun conversation. I'm really, really interested in seeing how this thing actually turns out. That being said, Jonah, I'm going to toss it over to you. Gianmarco is going to be here to mediate and moderate this entire thing. I don't know how this is going to turn out. Guys, if you have any strong opinions, throw them in the chat. If you have really strong opinions, you can either hang out to the end, we're going to do a Q&A, or if we really, really need to, you can come up here and educate us. Maybe you're a scientist, and you can tell us both that we're idiots. Or we can prove to you that you're an idiot. I'm not sure. It's gonna we're gonna find out. Jonah, what are you thinking, man?
I'm just gonna explain. Oh shit! God damn it! Hold on. I'm gonna explain. Sorry, my camera's acting up. I'm gonna explain at least what I'm thinking of the good format, or the format I wanted to do. Quijano, you seem like you agreed to it. I wasn't 100% sure. I think I need 5 minutes to just explain what evolution is and what the evidence is behind it, just uninterrupted, where I just go. And then I think you should have 5 minutes to go uninterrupted on your evidence for why it's not real. And then we go back and forth on stuff, right? Because
Yes.
I think there's too much. There's too many points to just do it slowly. I need to like get out the entire thing that I have here.
Let's do it.
Are you okay with that?
I'm good with it. Take as much time as you need, good sir.
So, Jamarco, do you have a timer ready? Because I'm going to start just explaining what evolution is, at least. I didn't make any slides or anything. I just got like stuff on a notepad, right? I might share so you guys can read along, but
let's try 5 minutes. I'll tell you when we're around 5 minutes. And if you have to finish, you finish. Yeah.
Yeah. Start it at 5 minutes and then give me like a 1 minute, like be like, hey, Jonah, 1 minute. And I'll be like, okay, great. I wish we could put the timer up here, but we can't.
Let's do this.
All right, here we go. Evolution. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you guys the notes I have, right? So I'm going to first explain what evolution is. Just make sure that people understand what it is. It's the process by which different kinds of living species are thought to have developed, diversified from earlier forms during the history of Earth through natural selection. More or less how species developed, how different species develop over time. That's what the entire theory is about. Based on what I talked with Keanu, he talked a lot about the origin of life. Evolution doesn't talk about the origin of life. That's not a thing. They don't know the origin of life. It's all about the origin of species, how species are created. And this happens through a process called natural selection. So I'm going to define a few things. Keanu, during your time, you can tell me if these definitions are garbage. You let me know.
Sure.
So definition of a species. More or less, a species, what makes something a species is two organisms or organisms, a group of organisms that can interbreed together and create offspring that can create more offspring, that can keep making offspring. That is the scientific definition of a species, right? That I found. That's the best one. There's a lot that can go into it depending, right? And we can get into that if there's controversy there. Natural selection, basically, it's the process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more offspring.
Hey, Jonah, can you full screen your notes there, bro? Because we're just seeing ourselves in like a.
Sorry, I'm being an idiot. Sorry. So, anyway, so then there's natural selection. This is basically anything that increases your likelihood of offspring and spreading your genetics means that your genetics are going to keep getting spread. This is the process by which different species come about, and it's how different things adapt, right? And so basically, like if you're better adapted in a hot environment and you're in a hot environment, you're going to survive, make more babies, and thereby your genes pass on, right? So there's a lot of different things that are evidence for evolution. The one that I think Keanu is going to bring up the most is the fossil record, which is like an interesting one because I redid my research on this. One of the most interesting things, and this is going to kind of be more of an anti-creationist argument, so sorry, but basically in geology, there are different strata. There are different levels to where the fossils are found. The lower levels are older fossils, which we can tell through radiometric dating, and the higher ones are newer fossils, right? We find different genuses or the same genus almost always in the same layer. We don't find mammals with dinosaurs. That doesn't happen, right? Which shows that over time that these species weren't coexisting. There was never a time when humans were with dinosaurs, right? That's point number one. I'm just going to go as quickly as I can through it. We have tons of different ancestors like Homo erectus. We have done genetic tests on Homo erectus fossils and found that some of their DNA is still within us to this very day from whatever the hell long ago it was, like 1.5 million years ago when we found them or when they existed. And then there's a ton of different similarities anatomically with these different ancestors, right? Like Homo erectus, there's a ton of different them. There are a ton of different ancestors that we believe and we have fossils for that were like ancient Homo species. And then I'll go into some of these. I'm not going to finish in 5 minutes. So the biggest one by far, in my opinion, is that we have so much of the exact same DNA as other species. So which shows or gives evidence that we have a common ancestor. We have 99.7% the exact same genome code as a chimpanzee, right? We have 50% the same as a banana. Fun fact. We are somewhat related to everything living on Earth, which shows that we all came from a common ancestor, right? Why would I have the exact same genomes as a banana otherwise? There are also vestigial structures, such as the palmaris longus muscle. This is a muscle that some humans have that serves literally no purpose at all. And then, is that 5 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Feel free to finish up that point, bro. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll quickly finish that point. There are certain things like your appendix. A better one, I think, is the palmaris longus muscle, where it's a muscle that we have that serves literally no purpose whatsoever in modern humans, but definitely served a purpose in our ancient ancestors for swinging from trees, right? And we see that common or similarly related species such as chimpanzees and gorillas have this muscle and they use it to swing from trees, right? So this is only some of it. I didn't get through all of it. Like I didn't talk about the fruit flies or anything like that, but I just wanted to at least get it out there.
No, we can circle back definitely. Let's have
Sure.
explaining points. Okay, hold on. Boom.
Whenever you're ready. I'm gonna stand this thing up.
3, 2, 1. Action.
I guess I'm gonna slowly stand while this does this. Jonah, I appreciate the intro, bro. I think that you presented a decent list of really, really interesting information. I do have to ask you this question before I get to my point, though. Is there an implication here that you believe we evolved from bananas?
No, bananas and us evolved from a common ancestor.
Okay. If we evolved from bananas, you evolved from the little ones with the seeds. I'm just saying.
Thank you. Thank you for spending 30 seconds of your time on that.
I evolved from plantains. And then David, what's going on, man? I had to throw it out there. Guys, I think that Jonah, you had presented a lot of really, really compelling information. There's one problem with the information that you presented. 0% of it proves evolution. 0% of it demonstrates an inarguable defense for evolution. So then what does it do? I think it demonstrates assumptions. What do I mean? Guys, I don't think that this conversation that we're going to have today or the entire conversation surrounding evolution or the belief in the theory of evolution is a scientific conversation alone. I believe very strongly, in fact, that this conversation is as much a psychology debate as it is a scientific debate. Why? Because we're not just discussing whether or not something supports something else in a scientific capacity. What we're really debating, if we're willing to admit it, is the unwavering willingness to accept what we're told and then defend what we're told as if it's fact, even if the evidence demonstrates that it's not. I think what we see in conversations like conversations surrounding the theory of evolution is the need to defend a belief system, even if that belief system doesn't have legs. Why? Because we are psychological creatures that like our belief systems. And anything that comes to disrupt what we believe to be real about our existence, we will defend, even if we don't have any valid reason to defend it. So that's why I think this is as much a psychology question as it is a scientific question, because the question that I would ask is, why do people, in this particular case, yourself, Jonah, go so far out of their way to defend the theory of evolution if the theory of evolution doesn't have enough weight to defend itself? Why are we scoffing at people almost as if they're silly for challenging this idea, Is it because science supports us doing so? Or is it because psychology makes us pack animals? And because our need to be accepted is more important to us unconsciously than our need to understand truth, that we will defend something that's not true because being accepted is more important to us. And I think that's the real debate that we're going to have here. So with that being said, I can present a lot of arguments to refute pretty much everything that he said, because as it relates to science, he presents valid points. As those points relate to defending the validity of the theory of evolution as scientific fact, none of those things will stand up. Zero of them. Which leads me to the core foundation of what the purpose of this podcast is in the first place. And I sent this to Jonah in a voice clip yesterday. And it's the same question I asked him in regards to other topics that we've discussed on this podcast. If you are presented with information that is compelling enough for you to challenge or maybe even let go of your existing worldview, will you unbiasedly let that go? Or will you continue to maybe even ignorantly or naively defend it blindly because that feeling of comfort is more important? And I think that's a challenge I throw out to all of you guys. If you guys are presented with information that challenges what you've always known, are you willing to let go what you've always known to accept new information if that new information is true? Or are you going to blindly look away to the new information because it's uncomfortable and just hold on to what you've always known? I think this is ignorance versus information. That's what we're debating here.
And we are 5 minutes.
Okay, none of that.
Did I do that on the button? Did I do that on the button?
4:51, to be honest. So
okay.
Very close.
Very close. None of that had to do with anything related to evolution. You just said like maybe we shouldn't listen. Literally nothing you said had to do with evolution at all.
That's because nothing either did anything you say. So I just pointed out what we're actually.
Okay, so hold on.
Okay, so
this is where I want to ask you, Keanu.
Wait a second.
What would prove evolution? Like, I don't understand. In my head, there's a ton of evidence that this theory is true, right? Okay. I'm curious if what you're saying is that I need 100% certainty that this is true for it to be valid, because you can't be 100% certain of anything, right? So that's what I don't understand is like, what is your criteria for evolution being true just on its own? Like, what does it need to show? Because the things that I was explaining, those phenomena, are explained incredibly well by the theory of evolution. Right?
They're not, though. They're not. They're the arguments that are presented.
Wait, hold on. Me having, let's say, 50% of the exact same genetic code as a banana, that would be very well explained by the fact that we have a common ancestor, right? That's why we have 50% of the same genetic code. We're not talking about a different one, but evolution explains this fact very well. What would disprove evolution is we had no similarities in the genetic code whatsoever, right? The fact that we are even something so separate as a banana has so much of the exact same genetic code as a human, helps prove that we probably came from a common ancestor at some point, right?
How?
I don't really understand what you're saying in the sense of how it.
One question, Jonah. Is evolution, the theory of evolution, peer-reviewed?
I don't know what you mean by peer-reviewed. The experiments that prove evolution are peer-reviewed. Experiments are peer-reviewed.
All of them? Like all the experiments?
I don't know. I can't say all of them. You could bring up an experiment that doesn't. I don't know. I don't know every single experiment ever. This isn't even an experiment when I'm talking about with the genetic code. I'm just going to focus on that because it's really simple. They literally sequence the genome of a banana, sequence the genome of a human, and we have 50% of the exact same, right?
And that is Berkeley, right? That's Berkeley making that those research.
So let me ask you a question, Jonah. You just said that the evidences, the studies that prove evolution are peer reviewed. Show me one.
Well, I don't know. You prove different things in evolution. The evidence is peer reviewed. You don't peer review is for experiments specifically. So if you want, I can show you an experiment that's peer reviewed. Do you want to see one?
Yeah.
If that experiment proves evolution, which you just claimed, sure.
Well, no, but like that's not understanding science. You don't peer review a theory. You peer review experiments that help prove the theory. Do you understand? I just want to make sure that's clear.
I understand that. So what I'm looking for is a peer-reviewed study that you can say at least convincingly, maybe not irrefutably, but at least convincingly proves evolution.
And I'm going to log into WhatsApp. What's the one? There's a study that I sent in the WhatsApp group chat. Gianmarco, if you can find the one that's on the fruit flies, on how fruit flies, hold on. I gotta download WhatsApp. I can show you that if you want. So I'll explain it while I'm bringing it up. I don't have WhatsApp on my computer, but I'll quickly explain it for a second. Basically, the experiment is they took fruit flies. Gianmarco, help me out if you can, and just put in the private chat. They took fruit flies, exact same species. Then they took a sample of the fruit flies, put them in one box, took another sample of the fruit flies, put them in another box. And then the fruit flies that kept eating mango, the other fruit flies kept eating apples or whatever the fuck it was. I don't know if it was apples. I forgot the fruit. They bred them for 45 generations. And over time, those fruit flies became more adapted to eating mangoes. And the other ones became more adapted to eating, I forgot the other name of the fruit. And to the point, and then they mixed them back together and they wouldn't breed with each other, which goes back to the point of what's a different species. A different species is when two species can't interbreed anymore, right?
No,
and they aren't interbreeding.
That's not at all the definition.
So what is your definition of a species? Because that's also where I think
we're not debating my opinion. We're debating the scientific definition of a new species. Is not that two previous species can no longer mate. That is not at all the definition.
Do you want to look up the scientific definition of a species real quick? That is the scientific definition of the species.
Pull it up. Let's pull it up.
Coming up.
Here. Okay.
All right.
This is the first. Here, hold on. A biological species is a group of organisms that can reproduce with one another in nature and produce fertile offspring. That is how scientists define different species.
Okay, but but here's the thing. Stating that two species can't mate any longer is not the same thing as stating that a new species was created. Those are two drastically different implications.
That's the definition of a species.
Jonah, you're reaching like Inspector Gadget on Turbo.
How am I reaching?
Because you're saying that because two birds who were still genetically and biologically the same birds, they still flew.
No, they're not the same genetically.
Okay, but they did not create a new species. A new species was not created.
No,
and more importantly, what you're referring to. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, the definition of a species, I don't know, unless you have a different definition. How scientists define species is a group of organisms that are able to reproduce and create reproducible offspring afterwards. When a horse and a donkey have sex, a mule is not a different species because a mule can't create more offspring afterwards, right? And that's why, and it's the same reason why horse and donkey are not the same species, even though they can make an offspring, right? But they aren't considered the same species because then their offspring can't make another interbred donkey horse, which we call mule, right? That is how scientists define it. If you don't have a different definition, then I don't know what to say, because I'm arguing evolution shows us how their origin of species, right? A species is this. If you think a species isn't this, then I don't know where we're going here with this, because that's how scientists have defined species, right?
Okay.
So I don't that's just that's what it is, right? That this is the process of how species change over time, right?
So that's peer reviewed. You're saying that was peer reviewed, that article that I put in the private chat, that's peer reviewed.
Yes.
Okay. Just reproduce before. Let me clarify a couple of things that you're talking about here, man. Right? Because one of the things that we're going to have to do if this is going to be effective is we're going to have to be really, really specific. And this is one of the problems that I find with people who espouse the belief of the theory of evolution having scientific merit, is that they get really, really specific with certain words, but then when it comes time to support their argument, they get really, really vague. What you're describing at best is speciation, not evolution, right? Speciation is not a necessary indicator of evolution. Right. So when we talk about evolution, we need to talk about, let me ask you this. Are you talking about biological? I think I know the answer to this, but for the sake of being specific, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you promoting biologic evolution or chemical evolution? Which aspect of this are you defending?
I don't really know what you mean, both.
Okay, so those are two different things. Biologic evolution is what we're talking about. We're talking of, this is the picture of the animals evolving. This is the primordial soup turning into walking. This is you talking about Neanderthal that have associations with humans. That's biological evolution. That's biogenesis. But there's something else that happened before that, which is called abiogenesis, which is the origin of life. That's what happened. What was the chemical process that actually started the source of life? Those are two different aspects of what we're discussing here. Both of these things are extremely important when discussing evolution. Evolution, the implication of the theory of evolution, even if we're just referring to biological evolution, tells us that there was, from a single-celled organism, because science, because evolution, because natural selection, a progress by which creatures completely changed their original species to become something entirely different than they originally were, i.e., single-celled organism to a land mammal, to a water creature, to a human being. These are drastic jumps in drastic evolutions or changes in foundational, like biological and genetic makeup. That's what the theory of evolution espouses. If we're going to support that evolution as a theory has the scientific evidence and basis to prove that, we have to demonstrate that. At best, when you're talking about speciation, which is that two species of birds which started out birds and were put in drastically different environments and were still birds, but they were different kinds of birds. You're talking about speciation, not evolution.
A species.
What's that?
Well, hold on. Wait, hold on. This is what I thought. I knew this was going to happen. Evolution is the process of how new species change and are created, right?
Okay.
Over time, right? So speciation is evidence for evolution. The fact that I can create a new species,
an evolutionary process for sure.
The fact that I can create a new species, right?
Okay.
You can argue that that's not that that isn't a new species. They look exactly the same to my eye, right?
No. It was still a bird.
They're new species.
You know what it did not become? A dinosaur. An iguana.
Yeah, but but you're not, but it's either way, it becomes a new species. My point is that for it to make drastic changes, that takes millions of years over small changes over time. One little thing changes over time that adapts it better and better and better and better until it slowly changes into something that looks completely different to us, right? That's what is happening. But in that fruit fly experiment, I'm showing you how even only in I think it only took 45 days, you can get a different species.
Can you show me evidence from your fruit fly experiment?
Yeah. Did you pull it up, Gianmarco? I need to get into the WhatsApp.
It's in the.
I don't see it.
Where is it? Is it in the private chat? You said?
Yeah, in the private chat.
Okay.
Both links, right? Evolution.
This one was the bird one. There was another bird one too.
There's a bird one, iguana one. You did not share anything.
No. This has here, come here.
These are two links, right?
So, okay, I'll just read this, right? Evidence for speciation. This is a different one. Here's the experimental results, right? This is from Diane Dodd. This is the really simple explanation. I can go look up the specific paper if you want me to, but this is the experimental results, right? So, usually we have to, usually this happens with geographic isolation, generally speaking, right? But in the science experiment, here we go. She took fruit flies from a single population and divided them into separate populations living in different cages to simulate geographic isolation. Half of the populations lived on maltose-based foods, and the other populations lived on starch-based foods. After many generations, the flies were tested to see which flies they preferred to mate with. Dodd found that some reproductive isolation has occurred as a result of the geographic isolation and selection for different food sources in the two environments. Maltose flies preferred other maltose flies, and starch flies preferred other starch flies. Although we can't be sure, these differences probably existed because selection for using different food sources also affected certain genes involved in reproductive behavior. This is the sort of result we'd expect if allopatric speciation were a typical model of speciation, right? So I will admit,
Go ahead.
I will admit what it is saying, which was me skimming it, was that they prefer mating with these fruit flies. So I was wrong there, right? Let's see if I can find one within a single lifetime, right? I also had the bird one. Hold on. Amanda had spent its winters about 50 years ago. However, backyard bird feeding became popular. That happened.
Like it becomes something else. Like a wolf becomes a dog. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's look up this, because I thought it was like literally they stopped being able to reproduce with each other. So I'd be wrong there. Diane Dodd experiment with fruit flies.
There's only one fruit fly experiment that I'm familiar with that was extremely popular. I'm sure there was probably others, because fruit flies are a good insect to use for experiments like this. I'll share it here in a minute.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, here, I'm going to share this in the chat. I'm going to share all my stuff in the chat, so that way if you guys want to check it out yourselves, you can. You can pull this one up too when you're done with that. That is probably one of the better known fruit fly experiments used. For those of you guys, experiment. What's that?
Sorry, I'm just looking for the actual experiment, because this isn't the actual experiment between sexual.
I sent you a link for an experiment in the chat, bro, if you want to check that out.
To these aspects. I will in a second.
So while he's researching DQ, you think
here you guys can here, we can look at whatever you have in a second. I just want to read this one thing.
DQ, do you think a wolf became a dog? Do you believe?
I mean, here's the thing: dogs and wolves are in the same family, so I think we're having a different conversation.
Wait, that is also another good example. But where'd you put?
No,
wait, can you put this in the private chat?
Okay. What's the difference?
Because I can copy and paste it. I can't copy and paste it from the comments.
Oh yeah, right.
Here you go. So what we're looking at here is a different fruit fly experiment. Feel free to share your screen, bro. It was a failed fruit fly experiment. The reason they use fruit flies is because their lifespan is extremely short. And so over the course of a decade, they're able to produce countless generations. In this particular case, they did 600 generations. And they did multiple different things. You can look through here. The summary is they did multiple experiments. They tried to manipulate or impact the genetics of the fruit flies in multiple different ways to kind of kickstart a transformation or environments that would influence the need for evolution. And again, they used fruit flies because they were able to do this over the course of 600 generations, which mathematically speaking, in an evolutionary standpoint, could stand for hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of years, depending on how you do the math, right? And so they use this as an example, and this is not the only time they've done this example. Jonah's referring to fruit fly examples. Time and time again, what they see is that even with external manipulation, which would not be a factor in an organic genetic environment, they could not, in any single example, find any way where a significant evolutionary process where the animals changed significant enough to demonstrate or support evolution took place. Countless times, no matter what they did, the best that science has been able to find, and Jonah can scour the internet for as long as he wants. I promise you, the best that you're going to find is examples of adaptation. That's it. What you're finding is adaptation, where creatures or beings changed to adapt to their circumstances or environment. Their bodies changed to accomplish that. And as a result, their chemical makeup changed to accomplish that. That represents a change in who they are and how they operate. It changes how their body functions, but it doesn't change their species per se. It doesn't change what they are at their core. There's a species, and I don't know where it is in the world, but there's a species of people somewhere on the planet whose spleen is 50% larger than anybody else on the planet. Why? Because they spend 80% of their life, or something to that effect, underwater. They're constantly diving, and they dive miles and miles underwater. They can hold their breath for 8 minutes at a time. As a result, their spleen, which is a reservoir for, I believe it's red blood cells, which releases oxygen in their body, has grown to a drastically larger size. And it's impacted the way their entire biology functions to a large degree. Those things have trickle-down effects, which impact a lot of different things, which would include reproduction and all of these different things. That demonstrates adaptation. It does not demonstrate evolution in the context that you have that natural selection eliminates a species and allows progression of other species. There is no evidence for that. There is everything that you're going to demonstrate, whether you're using the iguanas, whether you're using the fruit flies.
So how do you explain that we have the exact same genetic coding as everything on Earth?
Okay,
so that shows that we come from a common ancestor.
So, DeMarco, let's do this. Let's do this, guys, for the sake of making sure that we're staying on here. This is what I was talking about in the voice clip before. I think this is a fantastic way to do this. I think there's going to be a lot of different topics that we can discuss when it comes to evolution. Right now, what we're talking about is DNA and genetics. So let's take the next maybe 15 minutes and we'll talk about DNA and genetics. And let's see, from a DNA or genetics standpoint, you can demonstrate anything that gives a win towards the theory of evolution. A clear, inarguable win towards evolution. Is that a fair approach? Let's see if we can demonstrate that. Jamark, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with
Jonah,
that.
are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Perfect. So let's talk about genetics. So what you're talking about is, okay, why do we have such similar DNA with a chimpanzee?
Why do we have 99.7% of the exact same DNA?
Okay, I don't think that's the right number, but let's go with that number.
I mean, whatever it is. I think it's literally that. How?
It's not. I think it's 97. I don't think it's 90.
Okay,
but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. So let's, for the sake of this conversation, let me ask you a different question, and then we'll put this out. Okay, one question could be, why do we have such similar DNA to monkeys? That's a fantastic question. But here's my question to you. That's a good question, and we should answer that question. We can spend some time answering that. My question to you is, why does that similarity equal irrefutably evolution?
Okay, this is where we get into irrefutably. I don't know what you mean by irrefutably.
Okay, let me rephrase that word. Let's give a greater than likely, right? More likely that it is evolution than it is something else.
So it points towards evolution.
So let's say if there's a teeter-totter, right?
Yeah.
So that we're saying is that we don't know for sure, but is there a greater than likely argument that it leans towards evolution than the alternative?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
At least shoot for that. Let's at least shoot for that. So what is the greater than likely alternative that means we came from? Because for the sake of defining, and tell me if you agree with this, guys, for context, and we probably should have started with this talking about the fossil record or talking about the actual evolution of this. But for the sake of the argument, the way that these things took place is, if you break down the geological progression of things, about 4-something billion years ago, they say after the Big Bang Theory, we lived in a primordial soup. What was that primordial soup? Single-celled organisms that were sitting here in this thing. And then by the theory of evolution, those single-celled organisms survived and evolved to become more complex organisms. And those more complex organisms survived and evolved to become even more complex. And those turned into land mammals. And those land mammals evolved. And some of them went back in the water. And some of them turned into human beings. That, in summary, if you look at the geological model, you'll see from pre-Cambrian to the Cambrian event and all of the things thereafter, it tells us this is the map and the guideline of how things took place. Matter of fact, let me see if I can find this.
Wait, are we talking about fossils or are we talking about DNA right now? Now you're talking about fossils.
I'm giving a bit of foundation, and then we'll go back to DNA.
Okay. First off, I want to say the theory of evolution is not talking about the primordial soup specifically. The primordial soup, we don't know. That is not what evolution is. Evolution is just how species change and evolve over time into different species. How life started, that is a completely different theory than the theory of evolution. The primordial soup is just a guess by scientists right now. We don't know how life started. Just throwing that out there.
That's abiogenesis. I'm not talking about who created the soup. Okay. I'm simply talking about evolution. No, that's fine. So if we're talking about who created the soup, we don't have to go before that for the sake of this argument. But the argument of the theory of evolution that Darwin espouses states that soup, natural selection, evolved and animals became different things as needed by their environment. Those things became chimpanzees and all these different animals, and here we are. You agree with that argument?
More or less, yeah.
So we're generalizing, but for the sake of you guys having an example for this, here is more or less the picture of what we're talking about.
This is what I believe, just as like exactly saying what I believe. Like adaptation is just like a very small scale showing of evolution in the end. You just disagree, but anyways.
So these are the
so we're going to talk about fossils first.
No. I just want to give a context so we can come back to this. We probably should have started here, but we'll go to DNA. But in order for this to make sense, I want to
start with fossils. I just started with DNA because it's simpler.
We'll go back to it. We're already there, right? So here's the area that we're not going to talk about right here: the Hadean, the Archean, any of this. We're not going here. Okay. Technically, the primordial soup starts about right here, right in this area, I believe. So this is what we're talking about, and essentially, what we're saying is these are the eras through which we evolved. And then you have what's called the Cambrian explosion, and then essentially humans kind of evolved through here. So this is the frame of reference that we're using more or less for what the chain of events that took place that led us here. So somewhere along that line, humans, which started out swimming in that puddle, became us, where we're now talking on StreamYard.
Over millions upon millions upon millions of years.
Well, I mean, according to that represents about 4.8 billions years, correct?
Right.
Okay. So with that being said, from a genetic standpoint, now let's leap forward. We're going to go back and we'll talk about the fossil record and what that looks like. But for the sake, since we were already here, we're leaping forward. And the claim is that, okay, that explosion, that process that we just showed in that diagram is what happened according to your argument. And what you're saying is humans share 95+% of the same DNA as chimpanzees. So as a result, that must mean evolution?
Well, yeah. Do you want me to explain it?
Sure.
So first off, a really common misconception is that we evolved from apes. Apes and humans evolved from a common ancestor, right?
Do you know who that common ancestor was?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's like Homo erectus or I think it's one of them. I'd have to look it up specifically which one it is. But let me answer your question first. Let me answer your first question before you ask me another question. So basically, Jess, get her on. That would be helpful because I'm just a layman. I took AP biology a while ago and I'd like refresh my research.
Bring her.
So, so if we all start, let's say there was the first life, whatever, we don't know what it is. It's just one life thing, right? One life form. And then it slowly changed over time via evolution, yada, 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 right? How it shows the fact that all of us have the exact same sequences of genes. It's not that we're all made of DNA. It's that the fact it's the same sequencing. We are somewhat have the same sequencing as everything alive, right? shows that it is more likely that evolution is real because we all came from one thing. When we all came from that one thing over billions of years, we evolved, we adapted, we had different mutations that had different DNA, right? But we still have a lot of the same genetic code as everything alive, right? 50% the same as a banana. We have a certain percentage that's the exact same as a fungi, the exact same percentage as a tree, right? This is giving evidence that it's likely that we all came from one common source, one common living being at the beginning. So,
but it's not giving. It's you're hypothesizing that since we have similar DNAs, what are some of the reasons it could be? Well, similar, it could be
the exact.
Okay, cool. But so that must mean that we all came from the same ancestor. That is a hypothesis, but it's still
it's evidence, because if we weren't from a common ancestor, why wouldn't all of our genetics codes be different? All of our if we didn't all come from a common ancestor, then all of our genetic codes would be completely different. There'd be no similarities whatsoever in our genetic sequencing.
But that's not necessarily true at all.
But like, why would there be such a similarity?
That's the right question. The right question is, why is there such a similarity?
Right. And evolution explains that pretty well.
No. The evolution is a decent hypothesis. It's a decent explanation that could possibly be the reason why, but it's not the only one. Let me give you another very, very simple example. Do you know anybody that's a computer coder, a programmer, computer programmer, a data scientist?
Yeah.
Okay, computer programmers. If you guys were going to create a computer program that is a completely different computer program, right? It's going to be for social media. It's a completely different company, completely unrelated to another company that you've coded program for, but some of the nuts and bolts are going to be similar. Would it make sense to copy and paste some of the original code because you wanted to support the similarities,
right,
or should you just
original source code?
So because it's
all from an original source code.
It's not necessarily all from an original source code, but what I'm saying is
it's a really good example. Most code all comes from one original source code, the first programmer that they made.
Perfect. As a programmer,
it evolved and changed over time as we
needed evolved and changed. So what you're saying is those ones and zeros magically became Facebook by themselves, or they magically became Instagram by themselves, or they magically became, and then they became TikTok.
How computer programming changes over time.
Can I finish my answer? Let me finish my answer.
You said you're saying this, and I'm not saying that. So that's why I'm refuting it.
So I'll present two different options here, right? Option number one is that there was a source code. And according to I'm going to use this as a hypothetical example, right? I'm painting a picture to the argument that you're presenting. What you're saying is that source code created itself, and then based on the needs of, we're not going into that because that's abiogenesis.
Yeah, I didn't say source code created
Let's say source code created itself. Source code's there. And then source code recognized that the market that the market was changing and MySpace was no longer popular. So it evolved into Facebook.
Well, no.
And then it recognized.
Sorry.
And then it recognized, right? So option number one in this example is that coding recognized by itself that it need to evolve from MySpace to Facebook because the algorithm and the needs of the marketplace evolved. And then it recognized that, it needed to change into Instagram. And then it recognized it needed to change into Snapchat. And then that species didn't survive really well. So then Snapchat did not survive natural selection and ended up, not producing and reproducing. And so then we ended up coming into TikTok. The argument that you're espousing, Jonah, is that source code saw the needs of the environment and evolved into different social media platforms all by itself. But there's an alternative. A programmer who understood the value of source code said, I can do one of two things: create brand new code for no reason whatsoever, or for the sake of being efficient, because they're all going to be in the same environment to a large degree, that environment being Earth, we can use some of the same source code and simply adapt the source code and make the changes where appropriate. If we are doing what I suggested at the beginning, and we're letting go of preconceived ideas, we're using this teeter-totter as an example. Forget preconceived ideas. Jonah, if we're just asking a simple, unbiased, logical question of those two silly examples that I presented, which one, and guys, in the chat, I would love to hear your perspective. Which one makes the most logical sense? Which one, if the option is least or most likely of two options that we cannot prove, we're not trying to prove, we're simply presenting which is most likely, which one makes most sense? Source code decided to evolve itself to the need of its market and change to become things all by itself because the market demanded it, and that evolution is what explains similarities in source code, or a programmer used the same source code and then created the differences where necessary. If the question is which is more likely, since neither can be proven, I'd love to hear in the chat, I'd love to hear Jamarco, I'd love to hear Jonah, which one do you think is more likely?
Well, it's not analogous. So, okay, have you ever seen source code reproduce itself? Like computer source code?
I have not.
Have you ever seen biological DNA reproduce itself?
I have not.
It can. Right?
Define.
Like
okay, but you're
it reproduces. So DNA, which is that's all we are. We're made up of DNA. We're coatings of DNA. There's plenty, and I'm assuming you're not going to argue this. There's plenty of examples of DNA reproducing itself, right? When we have sex with someone else, we reproduce something else,
not
right?
changing to something entirely different. You're agreeing with me.
Wait, hold on. It changes it slightly, though. First off, every time there's a reproduction, there's a slight change.
Two parents with two different colors hair having a child that has red hair when neither one of them have red hair is a slight change, but it doesn't change its original. It's not they're not giving birth to a pterodactyl or a rhinoceros.
Well, I know, but hold on. You're hold on. I'm going back to originally what you were talking about, the source code. All I'm saying is your example isn't analogous because you're like, oh, why isn't a program, like it's obvious a programmer's changed the source code. But I'm like, the issue you're trying to say is source code doesn't reproduce itself, right? Biological code does reproduce itself, right? So then the question is okay, are there any examples that biological code changes itself? Happens all the time. It's mutations, right?
Sure.
It's what happens when you have cancer. Your cells mutate in a wrong way and then they fuck up, right? Those is your biological code changing. So your example doesn't work because source code never changes itself ever. Biological code, we have plenty of examples of it changing itself, right?
It does.
So yeah, it changes all the time, constantly, right? All evolution is billions of years of changing the code. If I took a piece of, that is like what happens over time. It's small changes that happen over time. What you're arguing with me is like, oh, it doesn't change from a bacteria to a pterodactyl, right? Over millions of years, it does. The fact that we have the same DNA, hold on. And this is one point, and I mean, we can disagree about this. Sorry, hold on. But the fact that we have the exact same genetic sequencing still with other beings and more with beings like chimpanzees that have a closer common ancestor to us that we can track, right? Shows evidence that evolution is more probable than another theory, right?
No, not right. That's what you're espousing, but you're just making that assumption.
My camera is fucked up.
You're not like, to be clear, no, that's not right. I think that's an assumption. I think it's a not overwhelmingly illogical explanation, but to be clear,
well, I can go through the more evidence for it, but like in terms of DNA, you were asking, how does this give evidence to evolution? evolution perfectly explains why we would have the exact same genome sequencing as like a certain percentage of the exact same genome sequencing as other living beings.
So does creative design. So does intelligent design.
I've never said it doesn't. You're bringing up creative design. I'm not saying that another theory isn't more probable. You said, what is giving evidence to the fact that evolution is more probable than not probable? I'm letting you know this is making it more probable because evolution explains this one phenomena and a bunch of other phenomena, which we can get into. But
so let me clarify what I meant.
Well.
What I was using that. So like Mark, I appreciate Mark. I appreciate
That's my dad, by the way. This is my dad. I don't know if you know
Mark,
it's my last name.
I appreciate you. I did not realize. I didn't even read the last name. So when I give my example, I understand the confusion. Maybe I didn't explain that properly. So I'm trying to avoid getting into intelligent design. I'm trying to avoid getting into creationism. But as I said at the beginning, there's going to be elements where we're going to have to touch on it a little bit for the sake of having a contextual argument. So in this particular situation, when I give you the greater than likely, I'm comparing it to intelligent design, which makes it not a red herring argument. It's not. It is an equivalent example.
But if we're doing that, then this is going to be different.
I'm presenting it as an alternative, right? So in this particular example, it is an equivalent example simply because I'm presenting it as an alternative. So if the question is, and I'll rephrase the question for the sake of the context, if the question or the foundation is, we can't prove either one. We know that there's similarities, or there's I'm using the word similarities for the sake of the language in DNA. We don't know why, but we know that those similarities exist, those overlaps exist. Well, then why? Well, option one that you're presenting is evolution. The option that I presented, and I won't represent, but I presented a minute ago, is there is an equally plausible argument that says that, well, if we use programming as an example of something that we can have context for in our lives today, then a programmer would very viably use the same source code, because source code doesn't reproduce itself to become something completely different. Source code needs to be programmed to become something different. And if there is intelligent design, then there is a now secondary and equally potentially more plausible argument that says that we could say that there is a common ancestor, and that common ancestor justifies the similarities or the carryovers in DNA. But then we could also say that an intelligent designer programmed it to be that way.
Wait, hold on. But now we're changing the arguments. The arguments was just, I was supposed to just present the evidence for evolution, right? So if we're going to start now getting into different theories and like, oh, your evidence could prove my theory, then we are going to get into a debate of creationism versus and evolution. We can do that, but what I was starting with just is that more.
We're 20 minutes on DNA, more or less.
Okay. We'll wrap it up after this.
To be on this. Oh,
like 15.
Well, I mean, anyways, I'll just wrap and just be like, I thought we were just talking about evolution and the evidence for evolution. If we're going to be talking about different theories and being like, hey, this could be presented in a different theory as well, we can get into that as well. I have different evidence because I had a feeling this might happen too, just in case. I have different theories too of why the creationism story, at least in the Bible, doesn't make sense with some of the evidence we see in nature, right? So I'll give one of those since we're on this right now. Are you ready? You want to switch to fossils now?
I think that's the best next step. Let me wrap up. Before we switch to that, let me say this. I said at the very beginning, I would have to provide reference intelligent design. And I'm not even talking about creationism. I'm just saying intelligent design. Creationism is more of a biblical pretext, right? Intelligent design is not necessarily. I think they're one and the same. But for the sake of the argument, intelligent design simply says that someone was intentional in doing this, not necessarily that the biblical narrative is true.
Wait a minute. You can't prove evolution theoretically could be intentional. I can't disprove God isn't making changes in the DNA purposefully. Like it's like a lot of Christians, what they believe is that God uses evolution in order to create new species, and that's how he did it, right? If we're arguing that, because that's an unprovable argument, then
let me give you an example for this. Right, let me give you one example before we get off of this. I'm going to share a link. Right, you got some material.
There are many comments about DNA. Maybe we should have someone coming in because maybe they want to.
So I'm gonna share an example of why. Because here's the thing: when it comes to DNA, this is why we definitely should have started with the fossil record first. But that's fine. We are where we are, and that's okay. We've never done one of these full-on debates before, so we're learning. We're learning as we go. Give us some grace, guys. Jesus. But it would have provided a little bit of a better foundation for what I'm talking about here, because DNA, you're getting into a much more nuanced conversation. But when you start here's my summary argument. I'm going to repeat a little bit. I'm going to share this, and then you can say whatever you want, Jonah, and then we'll transition back to the fossil record, right? So here's what I'm going to say. One, to recap what I said at the beginning. At the beginning, I think that this is a argument of psychology as much as it is for science. Why? Because we will blindly defend things that sound good, but maybe don't necessarily have as strong of an argument as we claim they do. We're just defending them because it's what we've always known. This is psychological reality that all of us experience in everyday lives. This is why the political arguments are so vast. You can have two extremely intelligent people that happen to be born in different states, and they have drastically and emotionally charged different views. It's not because one is necessarily right. It has to be a different element, right? There's another element, and it's this psychological element. And I think what we're talking about here is interesting. Here's the summary that I've noticed about evolution. And when you go through evolution, just to be clear, when I studied this, I tried to prove evolution right. You know what I find in every single argument for evolution? A presentation of information, a drastic leap to a hypothesis. And so what they say is, oh, well, because this is the case, this must be true. When we get into the fossil record, right, and we start talking about sorry, I'm going to pull this video up real quick here. When we get into the fossil record and we start talking about comparative anatomy, that's a fantastic example of this. Evolutionists have this idea that because these two things happen, it must mean this. Well, you got to show me more than it must mean, right? And so when I talk about intelligent design, I'm not trying to present an entirely different argument that we have to support. I'm simply saying that if I can present an alternative idea as easily as you presented yours, then that automatically reduces the merit of how solid yours was. Because if we're talking about two things that can't be proven, then yours shouldn't be that easily refuted with another idea. If an idea is that easily replaced, it begs the question of the merit of the idea in the first place. So that's my simple
throw out there that I can't disprove that God isn't going through evolution. Like, you could argue God uses evolution in order to create species. But anyways, I don't want to keep getting into the meta conversation. Let's get to fossils, dude.
No, I'm going to share this video. I said I was going to share this video. Hold on.
Okay.
Copy.
So I guess we're going to do the comments at the end, yeah?
Yeah, we're doing like a 30-minute Q&A at the end, guys. So if you have questions, neither of us know really that much, right? I'm doing my best to remember my AP biology and why we believe in evolution. And Quijano is riffing it. So, you know. Okay, Keanu, can I at least... I'm going to go into the main thing with the fossil records that makes evolution...
We're just jumping all over the place, bro. No.
All right.
Please. I don't know how I hate this so much. Why can't I just freaking copy URL? Thank you. Jesus. All right. So here we go. We'll start here. Just to provide a little bit of context, it's easy to say, oh, this is super simple. This clearly is demonstrative of evolution, right? Well, then I think this is where, let me please share this. Present, share screen. All right, let's see if you guys can hear this.
We go. This is a protein, a basic building block of life. A protein is made up of a chain of amino acids that bond together in a specific sequence. When it comes to living things, though, not just any amino acid will do, and not just any sequence will work. First, of the roughly 300 amino acids we know of, only about 20 are useful for life. Second, these amino acids must be arranged in a very rare sequence to form the right kind of protein useful to build a living cell. So you got the basics, let's do the math. What are the odds that an undirected, mindless process like evolution could produce just one single protein molecule fit for life? Let's keep it simple. The size of a protein with a stable structure called a fold ranges between about 75 and 30,000 amino acids. Let's just take a small number like 150. Fair enough? Great. So if each amino acid in the chain of 150 has roughly 20 possible variations, that would mean a life-permitting protein forming by chance would be 20 to the 150th. Now you reduce that down, pass it around, you get 10 to the 195th on the wall. That's a 1 with 195 zeros after it, just in case you didn't know. But there are other rare sequences that can work, and we would have to factor that into the equation. But I'll be honest, I just don't want to do that. Thankfully, Doug Axe, a molecular biologist, has, and he found that the odds of a relatively short protein to properly function are less than 1 in 10 to the 77th, which is true for a large number of proteins. So that's a 1 with 77 zeros. Now you throw the peptide and the left-handed amino acid problems in there, you get something close to 10 to the 164th. Now, keep in mind that scientists define the occurrence of anything with less than 1 in 10 to the 50th as absurd. But we're way beyond absurd here. Allow me to paint a visual. It would be like traveling the universe in an accidentally manufactured spacecraft, stopping on a whim, then reaching out blindfolded into a sea of 10 to the 80th different colored atoms and retrieving the only red one. All this, mind you, just to get one protein, and you need roughly 300 to form the simplest living cell we know of. But the point is this: can't get a protein, you can't get a cell, and you can't get a life. That's just, well, life.
So that is a summary, right? So when I give this example, and you can say whatever you want, then we can move back on to the fossil record. When I give an example like this, the reason I found this video is because mathematically speaking, it's going to be really, really difficult for us to be able to explain this in mathematical numbers that make sense. A graphic like this does a slightly better job of giving us some context we can wrap our head around. But what those maths, that math presented was the mathematical likelihood of one protein cell getting generated. You need 300 just for life to get born. We're not talking about all of the other spans. The mathematical likelihood of one protein getting put together to start the process that you're saying just happened so obvious is extremely unrealistic. And when you take that math and you quantify it next to all of the steps that's required, the scientific logical support for that being a realistic option is just astronomical. It goes beyond anything somebody could argue. If you're trying to paint a nice illustrative picture of evolution because we have similar DNA, that's very easy to say. But when you have to go and support this using genetics biologically, I could give you a list of biologists who have done this and have proven these numbers time and time and time again to not work out. Just to be clear, this is why, Jonah, all of the examples that you tried to produce, none of them have been successful.
That wasn't
because this part is not real.
I need to respond, Keanu. Like, that was so fucking long. That doesn't prove that evolution isn't a thing. Do you think that evolution is completely by chance?
To be clear, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. I think that evolution, in that we change, we adapt, regrow, your body will adapt to its environment. All of that's real. I think that the idea that we started from single-celled organisms and then that those animals...
Just answer my question. Not
this. I am answering your question. But we need to define.
You're going way too much into it. Just, do you think evolution, the mechanism how evolution happened, how animals change, do you think that how things change is by chance? Because he said this is the likelihood of it happening by chance. This isn't, but proteins don't change by chance.
I don't know how to answer your question any different than what I was answering. So I'm going to answer it like that one more time. Do I believe that we adapt and change to our circumstances and environments? Yes. Do I believe that we become different creatures altogether, that we started from some primordial soup and then became fish, which became this? I think that there is zero evidence to support that plausibly. Every evidence that could seemingly support it could equally or greater be supported by other examples.
I'm talking about the video right now. The video stated that, hey, here's the chance of a protein being created by chance. Evolution, none of it happens by chance. It happens by natural selection. So to go through and being like, all of these things would randomly organize together, here's the chance of that happening. But evolution doesn't evolve by random chance. It's not random chance.
But you're focusing on the word chance. It doesn't change the requirement.
No, but that has to do. But you're saying here's the probability of creating a protein. That's not true. He's giving the probability of creating a protein by random chance. The thing is, the process of evolution isn't random. It isn't a random process. So it's a flawed argument because it's not happening by chance. That's the issue. So it's a stupid argument because we didn't generate proteins by chance. It happened slowly over time through natural adaptation. So
okay, so let's go into the.
So anyways, I'm just going to throw it out there. That video had proved nothing. That had nothing to do with how species change at all. It is just like, how could have a protein ever been created randomly? Well, guess what? Evolution doesn't say proteins are created randomly, so it's stupid. It's like not even logical. Like unless you think evolution happens by random chance, which a lot of creationists do, they think that, hey, what you're saying is these species are changing randomly or by complete chance, and they're not changing randomly. The probabilities change because it's not by chance. So I just want you to know that that's a flawed argument. I mean, I think like we can get back into DNA. That's going back into DNA, but I had to respond to that video. Like it doesn't.
No. I think you should respond to that. I think you focusing on the word chance that changes nothing about the rest of the argument.
But we can.
Okay,
because I'm not randomly putting a protein together. What's happening is over time, slowly small adaptations happen. Like a single change in the DNA code. They're like a small change. Theoretically, It would have been like 6 letters for like a bacteria, let's say. I don't know. Then 1 letter changes, right? So like I'm going to describe the process of evolution, how we understand it. I'm going to make it really simple. 10 letters, right? Whatever. Does enough, it can eat, whatever. It gives its basics function, yada, yada. Reproduces, same 10 letters. Reproduces, same 10 letters. Then a mistake happens in the reproduction. One of the A's changes to a B, right? I forgot the letters for DNA. I'm not like, I forgot right now, right? This change, 99% of the time, just kills the cell. The cell's like, now none of this fucking works. We're dead, right? That's what happens almost always with mutations. That's how cancer happens. It's like, I forgot the exact chance of a mutation actually being useful, but I've got to look it up. I forgot the probability. I'm just going to be honest. But every once in a while, that change makes it like, oh, now I'm actually slightly resistant to drugs right now, right? Like actually, like because I did that mutation and this happens with bacteria all the time, how they become bacteria resistant is we take antibiotics, it kills most of the bacteria, right? But there were a few that had a mutation at some point that actually randomly gave it some resistance to the bacteria. And those are the ones that reproduce. And then it creates more bacteria that's resistant to the drug, right? So it's not a random process. That's what I'm arguing here. Like you're arguing that like the probability of a protein being created by chance. I'm like, but it wasn't created by chance. It was created by a very specific process. Now you can argue God created the process. That's a lot of religious people argue. That's what most, I feel like, in the modern day argue. But anyways, so I'm just saying that had nothing to do with evolution. Like that was just what's the probability of this? And I'm like, well, actually, your probabilities are stupid. Anyways, that's my response. Yeah. If you want to go to the fossil record, we can, or you can.
All right, we have to go to the. I'll respond to that. We'll go to the fossil record. Right here's what I'll say to what you just said. What you've done time and time again, Jonah, you keep doing the same thing. You keep proving my point, which is this. That you're demonstrating examples of humans or animals or creatures changing, but still staying in the not becoming something drastically different. And you're assuming that because that can happen, humans can adapt. People can grow larger spleens. Those things change. Then obviously that means we came from monkeys or we share a similar ancestor. What I'm saying is I agree with the first half of your argument, but you have still yet to successfully demonstrate how that argument that we change and evolve based on our environment equals we came from different creatures and evolved from that. You have yet to demonstrate that.
It happens over millions of years. So if you want to talk about that right now, specifically.
Let's go to the fossil record. The fossil record will do a great job of discussing that.
36 minutes in the DNA. Let's jump into the fossils, right?
Okay,
The
well, we can
fossil
talk about the fossils. I mean, the
Fossil
fossil
record-
record. The fossil record. Here's where the fossil record, what it does more of, in my opinion, I don't think it proves evolution as much, but disproves the idea of creationism. That's my personal opinion with the fossil record. That it shows very clearly that like things changed over time, or different. There were different species at different points in our history. So I'll give the general example. So there are certain species. So, okay. So first off, geologically, I have to explain. So sedimentary rock, do you agree? I need to understand if you agree with this. Do you agree that older rock is on the bottom, or it gets pushed down over time by geological forces, and then newer rock is replaced on top of that, and then on top of that? I don't know if you believe in that or not. Do you believe in that part of geology?
For the sake of this argument, let's say yeah.
Okay. So there are certain species that are only found in older records, right?
Mhm.
And they're not found in newer ones. There are no human fossils that are found on the same level as dinosaurs, for instance, right? Which seems to indicate that we never existed at the same time as dinosaurs, right? So from that, it shows that like if species didn't evolve and change over time, we would see species that were in the older rock in the newer rock as well, right? Why would we not see species that are in the older rock and the newer rock if species don't evolve and change over time? So that's usually the main evidence for how fossil records show that evolution is a thing, because otherwise we would see species from billions of years ago or whenever, like the first, that would also show up today, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the main argument from fossil records for evolution.
How does, you said two things. One, I don't understand how that supports evolution. Two, I don't understand how that disproves creation. All you said was that there's different.
If all the animals were created within a week, why wouldn't they all show up in the same layers of the strata? If some is older rock and some is newer rock.
Okay, but
it's a fair point.
How does that not? I don't understand how you don't understand that.
All
the species would show.
But again, how does that prove evolution?
I don't. Well,
okay, so let's use an example.
Let's go into how that proves evolution. Wait, let's go into how that proves evolution, right?
Okay.
Evolution is the idea that species change over time, correct?
To create entirely new and different species,
correct.
Right? Again,
you find only certain species 100 million years ago. If they don't change over time into new species, why don't we see in the fossil records the same species over and over again?
Okay.
Do you understand my argument at least? I want to make sure you at least understand what I'm saying.
What you're saying, but all you're saying is you're espousing an idea, but none of this demonstrates the proof of what you're saying.
I don't. Am I crazy? All right, at least Jasper agrees with me. Like I at least someone understands what I'm saying. Okay. The whole theory of evolution is species change over time, and that they change into completely different.
And you put a timer on and let him get his whole argument.
No, I mean, I don't know. I can only say the same thing over and over again. I don't even know. It's like I don't even understand how you how am I going to explain that? Okay. Why? Let me just ask one question. Let me ask a different question. I got it. Why do we not see the same species over the entire geological record?
Just let me know when I can respond.
Respond to that.
Give me an example of what you mean. Like over the entire geological record.
There are certain species that show up in the lower strata. Okay, so dinosaurs.
Okay.
Why don't we see dinosaurs in newer strata of rock or really old strata of rock when they didn't exist?
That could simply mean that dinosaurs, using your argument, a simple plausible example is that dinosaurs were on the planet in a different era.
But
it doesn't mean that we came from dinosaurs, right? That is not mutually exclusive.
Okay, no. Why? Okay, so why don't you find? Here's a better question. Why don't you find human fossils?
No, do me a favor, bro. Just present whatever argument you want, and then give me an opportunity to respond, man. Because every time I try to respond, you just want me to answer more of your questions.
Let me. I think it'll make more sense. Okay, why don't we see newer animals? So let's say humans. Why don't we find their fossils in the oldest strata?
Okay.
Can I present my perspective on this? Right, because you're asking me really narrow and limited questions, right? So let's just talk about the fossil record as a whole. So one thing that we need to establish as a foundation, you're saying that this all happened over the course of 4+ billion years, correct? Okay. Explain to me the Cambrian explosion.
What do you mean by, what do you want to explain about it?
The Cambrian explosion. Are you familiar with the Cambrian explosion?
Vaguely, I have to remind myself. I remember it. This is my understanding. Maybe you can remind me. How I understand it is there was a certain period in time where there was an explosion of life, of like very new life, like many different types of life forms. Before that, we thought it was like single-celled organisms. Am I somewhere on the ballpark? That's what I think it was, from what my vague memory.
I'll pull it up here and I'll just share the screen. We'll read the headlines from Wikipedia, right? For everybody has a context for the Cambrian explosion. Cambrian explosion is an interval of time, approximately 538.8 billion years ago, right? It lasted for about 13 to 25 million years and resulted in the divergence of most modern metazoan phyla. The event was accompanied by major diversification and other groups of organisms as well. What does this mean in layman's terms?
There was a huge
We're taught that evolution took over 4 billion years to take place. One argument that you've presented multiple times is that this is possible because it's small, incremental things that took place over time, correct?
Yeah.
The problem is this. There are no fossils, none, zero. Not one complex fossil existed, has been discovered before the Cambrian explosion. Not one. There is none. Not a single example of a single-celled organism evolving small and gradually over time, which is what evolution espouses. We see none of that. What we do see is a sudden and immediate onset and explosion of a bunch of individually alone separate creatures, all serving their own purpose. And all of that happened within a 10 to 12 million year period, not a billion year period. So what evolutionists have had a difficult time explaining is, how do we present the argument that evolution took place over the course of a billion years, but the fossil record does not demonstrate evolution, the life and death and historical evidence geologically of things. What we see is randomly, we don't see a gradual onset of these things. We see a sudden explosion. Suddenly, over the course of
13 to 25 million years is a sudden explosion to you?
Okay, that's fine. 25. It's 13 to 25 million years. How many years is that? It's 12 million years. So 12 million years, a bunch of
13 to 25 million years.
So you're saying that's a long time?
It's an insanely long time. First off, and also evolution never stops. I'm just saying, like, that's crazy. Like, in terms of geologic time, it's very sudden. In terms of time, that's an insanely long amount of time. That's longer than humans have ever existed.
Here's the thing. So I'm assuming it's long enough for the evolutionary process that you're espousing in this entire argument for those things to take place.
Correct.
But it's not.
Why not?
I'll give you one simple example, right? And I'll bring
not long enough. It wasn't like in a single instance. It was over 13 to 25 million years.
No, right? So let's just go to a different things, right? Let's use Dr. Gunter Beckley, right? You can look him up. I won't go into anything. You guys can look him up. He discovered 180 new species in the fossil record. He's published 160 papers. And one thing that he drastically clarifies, I don't understand what Jasper's. I'm not sure.
Jasper, don't worry about it. Just let Keon keep going.
So this guy, would you say that a guy who has discovered 180 new species in the fossil record and has published 160 papers is probably qualified to speak on the topic?
Maybe he might be an idiot. I have no clue. I don't know who the fuck this guy is. I don't know.
If you don't mind.
No. We'll pull him up. I'm gonna pull him up.
I don't know who this guy is.
All right. Let me change the screen share. Share screen. Dr. Guntler. I just Googled his name. Right. You can look him up. Discovery Institute, discovery.org. I mean, the guy's done, I mean, you can, Evolution News, Free Science Today, the guy's done a lot of different things.
What does
right?
he say? What is it? He's a paleontologist.
Basically, what he says is he supports this exact same argument. He says that evolution presents the claim that it's small and sudden changes over billions of years. If that's true, then it would be very simple to demonstrate and support evolution, because evolution in the fossil record would demonstrate slow and gradual change over billions of years. However, the fossil record does not show that. It shows no small and gradual change over billions of years. It shows a sudden and random, quick onset of a bunch of individually established animals. No evolutionary precursors, no transitionary fossils, nothing. All of a sudden, over the course of billions of years, which is what evolution claims, we have nothing. And then all of a sudden, over the course of 12 million years, we see all kinds of stuff living for all of this period of time. Then the question becomes, if evolution had small and sudden changes over billions of years, why don't we see billions of years of evolutionary transition in the fossil record?
I don't understand even what you mean by that. So first, can I answer that?
Of course.
So first off, evolution can happen over millions of years. Evolution is constantly happening all the time. It's still happening right now, first off. To be able to see the effects, it takes millions of years, but it has happened over billions of years. That's what scientists think. It happens over millions, but you'll see it for billions, right? So fossil records, to answer your question, I don't even know what you mean by transitionary species. I can show you where it looks like we're transitioning, right? But the thing is we're talking about millions of years of different times. So I could show you what would look like a transitionary species, but it took over 1 million years. So you would just be like, no, that's just a human with a slightly less big bone structure, right? Just to start. But also, none of that answered my question, right? Why don't we see humans in the Cambrian era? Why don't we see, if there's a different theory, like creationism or anything like that, that we were created in a really small span of time, right? Why wouldn't you find humans in the earlier epochs, right? You should find human fossils over all the time that life's existed if all species were created at once, right?
Yeah,
unless you're saying that species snap into existence, right? That would be the only other thing. How does a dinosaur appear out of nowhere only 100 million years later, right? What would explain only seeing dinosaurs in a certain strata is over time, all life is evolving, right? Changing slightly until it eventually reaches something different over millions and billions of years, which is really hard for our human brains to wrap around. If we were all created at once, right? You would see all species in any part of the fossil record, right? I mean, I don't see how you don't understand that argument. You didn't really answer my question. Why we don't see humans earlier.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm gonna share a couple of different things. One, you didn't answer my question either. But
exactly.
Right.
Let's start. Wait a second. So, Jonah, why don't you show the evolution that you think you've seen in the fossils, that we can see in the fossils? So you answer him, and then him answering.
So, yeah, fossils on their own don't prove evolution. I'm going to throw that out there. It just gives a leg of support, right? Here's the leg of support that it gives, right? You see species changing over time. That's the claim of evolution. You see different species in older times, you see different species in middle times, and you see different species in newer times. All that's what evolution claims, is that species are changing over time. Just this piece of evidence doesn't prove that it comes from natural adaptation or it doesn't do anything. All of this piece of evidence in terms of fossil records, the only leg it's supporting is the fact that species are changing over time. They're not staying the same over time, right? In Quijano,
one more time.
It's showing that species change over time. It doesn't show that species are the same over time. You don't see the same species in the oldest fossil records as you do in the newest one, indicating that change is happening. Now, it doesn't prove that it's happening via natural selection. It doesn't prove that it's happening via mutations. It doesn't prove any of that. All it proves, the part of evolution, is it proves the part that animals change over time, and you can literally see that.
It just shows that there's different animals, bro. It doesn't show that they're changing.
It doesn't show they're different animals because
see images, guys. We need to see images because it's here.
Okay, I will bring up here. The issue is you don't find fossils in the same place. It's very rare that you're going to find, like, the graphics they make are just representations, right?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just because Gianmarco was talking about images. I can show a graphic, but there's not going to be in the exact same place fossils of the Cambrian era as like the Proterozoic. Like, that doesn't happen in reality. They find fossils. They find them at the same level, but they don't find them at like in a full map. I can show the full map that scientists make.
I want to see it, but here's something that I think that needs to be presented, right? What you have said multiple times in this situation is that evolution, us becoming different species entirely, has taken place with small, gradual changes over billions of years. I'm arguing that you're talking about simple evolution and changes that within us, we're not becoming anything different. You're saying, no, those changes make you become something different. And you've said that that's taken place over billions of years. Well, if those slow and gradual changes took place over billions of years, and those animals or species or beings that existed didn't live for billions of years, then we should have billions of years of example of something that's in between a fish and a monkey, for the lack of a better example. You should be able to find billions of years of fossil evidence that shows us animals in transition.
Have you ever seen the fossils of Homo erectus?
Show us
that. Do you know what that is? Do you know what Homo erectus is?
I'm very familiar with what Homo erectus is.
So how do you not see that as a transition between a primitive monkey and humans? It's somewhat monkey and it's somewhat human.
Show me.
Okay. Homo erectus. Let's start. This is just one transitionary stage. So you realize we can look at the different ones, but this is just the beginning, right? Yeah, this is like the closest to a human we have. So I'm just going to use Homo erectus as an example. Here.
Find the argument.
So here you go.
Okay.
It looks somewhat human, but it has characteristics that aren't human. And if you want me to show you and I can look up specifically with this species what it is, and then we can look at the one before it. It looks a little bit more like a monkey.
Artistic renderings. You're showing me
a fossil.
You're showing me people drawing pictures that represent their interpretation.
Okay. Well, here's a fossil. Do you want to see a fossil?
Yes.
Here's a fossil of Homo erectus. Here we go. Right?
Okay.
They're slightly shorter. They have bigger skulls. They have different bone structures than us, but it's an in-between. Like, they have a wider cavity. They have wider hips because they didn't need throwing stuff as much, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. So it's an in-between stage. It's not quite human, but it's not quite what we would consider a monkey either. So I don't understand how that doesn't start showing you.
Because it doesn't at all, right? So let's give you an example.
Give up more
Yes. Just show the march of progression. Let's pull that up. Pull the march of progression.
Is that the name of it?
I believe so.
Because you want to see I mean, this is a graphic, but I'd have to bring up it.
But would you agree that this is the scientific graphical representation of the transition that you're trying to demonstrate to us?
Well, okay. What about the skeletons? The skeletons, they must be based.
But we can talk about this. We'll talk about this. Just so we're clear, Jasper, and I don't know if you know this, and we may not be able to prove this here because I can't find the papers for it. If you can just zoom in on the one that's got like the middle left, that's got the most pictures.
This one?
No, farther left.
This one?
Right there. So that one, I think the majority of science at this point has demonstrated that the majority of the left of those isn't even, they're just basically monkeys. If you go back, this I believe was in Life magazine.
What do you mean? That's exactly what you would see.
Okay.
Wouldn't the one on the most left be a monkey or somewhat like a monkey? Isn't that the whole point?
Exactly. So Jess is talking about exactly what I'm talking about. This is the old version of it, the version that you're still believing is true, the version that most people still believe.
No, I know we didn't come directly from apes. It's a common ancestor. Okay, whatever.
Here's the thing. What we've established is that the majority of the left of that, not true. What they also say in the small print is that for graphical purposes, these things are demonstrated being shown as having walked upright. But in reality, none of them would have walked upright. None of them whatsoever. So basically what you have is humans and then what could potentially be considered a Neanderthal. That's it, which is, for depending on the argument and how you view it, a variation of humans. So what that demonstrates is nothing as it relates to the storyline of humans evolving and becoming different creatures and becoming something different.
It does not the
demonstrate
transition
that.
of the fossils. I'm starting with
And
the first.
you used examples that have been debunked.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Yeah.
You said you would see fossils of us transitioning. They have fossils of us transitioning from an ape-like.
And what you just showed us has been proven that that is
those
not
fossils
true.
don't exist. Any
Correct.
of those.
Correct. I'm saying none of those fossils exist.
Hold on, we're gonna have to dive into this then.
Yeah,
We can dive into.
So hold on. So Homo erectus. Wait, I just showed you the Homo erectus one. Do you want me to look up the specific species?
Yeah, you want to look up. You want to basically what you like talk about research
records of human ancestors. Hold on. I need because you're not going to believe it unless I show you pictures of fossils.
It doesn't exist. There aren't fossils. Darwin himself, while you're pulling this up,
Darwin doesn't know anything about this. Darwin just started the idea of the theory. So I have to find first all of the human Homo species before us. Wait, I think I had a thing on this because I had a feeling you were going to bring this up. Hold on. I think I found something earlier. Okay. Hold on. I'll share my screen. Is my screen shared right now?
No.
Okay, hold on.
There you go.
Okay. So this is just with the skulls, right? But these are human ancestors, right? The skulls change over time as we get older, right? They look less and less human, right? I could find it with the different skeletons, every single one, but they're saying we have skeletons for this one, right? I could look up Arthropterygoramidus, right? I could try to find a picture of all of these in a line to illustrate it to you.
It seems to be all monkeys. It doesn't seem like to be an animal camp.
They're all monkeys. So the only thing you're going to be able to find, Jonah, is humans. You're going to be able to find human. You're going to be able to find monkey. Well, and then you're going to say, well, because they look similar, we obviously evolved. You cannot demonstrate an example of the evolution. There is no example of the evolution. Putting two different skulls that have similar similarities doesn't mean they came from one another.
So so Homo erectus, do you know that we have some of the same DNA as Homo erectus?
We've already assessed the DNA thing a little bit, bro. Like you cannot, just because the DNA has similar DNA, that does not mean that we came from them. Okay. And other equally plausible presentation could be demonstrated for that. And genetically, we didn't.
Okay, we're not going back. We're shifting the argument because how this all started was you're like, Jonah, there's no transitionary fossils. You can't find transitionary fossils where it looks like one.
You're just showing me
fossils, bro. Why do you what makes a monkey fossil versus a human fossil?
Yeah, Jonah, reopen that one. Reopen, if you don't mind. Okay, so I guess what DQ is trying to say is that before the monkey, also there is nothing coming from the water to the monkey, for instance. If this theory is
that transition takes forever. That would be, we have so many fucking fossils. It'd be ridiculous.
On those layers that you were talking about, you would find it eventually. It would be overwhelmed.
You would eventually find it because we're talking about billions of years. How many of these creatures? No, Jonah, you keep jumping around, bro. Over the course of 1 billion years, during the era under which those existed, how many millions or billions of their transitional from ape or whatever, the transitionary thing you're trying to demonstrate should have existed? How many? There should be billions of examples. Maybe they're not close to each other.
Wait, no, there aren't that many fossils ever. There wouldn't be billions of fossils. Fossils are that's a very rare thing.
There's 7 billion people on the planet right now.
How many were there 8,000 years ago? Not many.
Jonah, there are 7 billion people on the planet within, let's call it, 120-year time span. How many do you think could have existed over the evolutionary process of billions of years that you're trying to tell me took place? If we can produce 8 billion in 100 years, how many can you produce in a billion? There aren't that many. These populations weren't nearly as big as ours. Not even close. But we're talking about billions of years. How many 100-year spans existed? Like, Jonah, this is my point, bro. This is what I said at the beginning. If you're going to continue to shut down anything that argues your points of view, then we're never going to get anywhere. I'm simply saying that everything you're saying makes sense to me. But in order for you to take what you're presenting and then make it mean that we evolved from different species, you're making assumptions. You're making jumps, right? This is what you're doing. You're saying, well, you have blonde hair and blue eyes. This one has blonde hair and blue eyes. You speak with an accent. You speak with an accent. You must have the same parents. At a micro scale, that's exactly what you're doing. And what I'm telling you is that just because there are overwhelming similarities, what's a doppelganger? A doppelganger is an example that you can be identical in every single way and still come from a completely different lineage, come a completely different bloodline. What you're telling me is that the logic that you're trying to push out here is that because you look alike, you're similar, you have all of these similarities, obviously you come from the same place. And what I'm telling you is that I understand that assumption, but you have to acknowledge that without some sort of solid proof, that is still just an assumption. And there are so many different examples that demonstrate to you why this assumption actually doesn't carry water. And the fact that over the course of 100 years, we have 1 billion people on this planet. So let's zoom all the way out, Jonah. In 100 years, we have 8 billion people. Let's assume they were all buried. That's 8 billion skeletons on the ground. Fast forward 1 billion years, if everything goes, the whole ground is covered with skeletons of various creatures.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think you understand that there are like, this is a very unique time space. There's never billions of a single species ever. This is like a very unique thing for humans. Like what you were saying is, shouldn't there be billions of fossils? That's what you're saying right now. What I'm telling you is the size of these populations of our ancient ancestors were so small, plus the added fact that usually there aren't fossils. Fossils is a very rare process. It doesn't happen very often. You realize, like, if you went into a graveyard, you wouldn't, I mean, not a graveyard, that's different. They preserve bodies, whatever. If you went into most animals that just die, their bones aren't preserved. We can find how often fossils are made, but it's an insanely small percentage of things. Fossils are an incredibly rare phenomena. The only reason why we have any is because if you take all the species, there's a lot of them, right?
And here's the thing,
we only found a few examples, because these are small populations, and then fossil preservation is an incredibly rare process.
Okay, so here's just for context, because Jonah thinks this isn't that serious, right? And then he's going to debunk this guy too. The guy
I just showed you the transitional fossils. You're just saying, no, these aren't.
You didn't show me a transitional fossil. You showed me a fossil of a monkey next to a fossil of a human.
No, dude,
you have not demonstrated any argument by which those are demonstrated as transitional. You just showed me two different creatures with similarities standing next to each other. I could take a fossil of a chimpanzee right now and the fossil of somebody that we knew that died in the last 50 years and put them next to you. Are you going to tell me that's a transitional fossil because they're similar, bro?
Bro, it shows that we're related to them, but that's besides the point. Okay.
Darwin himself, right? And Darwin's Origin of species.
Dude, Darwin doesn't know shit. I'm sorry. Darwin
Is where we get the theory of evolution, bro. He's the one that literally started this conversation.
Yeah,
so for you to say he doesn't know anything.
But okay.
Right. He doesn't. A lot of his theory would change.
To be fair, it was a long time ago, and
that was a long time ago. Our understanding of modern evolution is completely different than Darwin's. It's a very
Correct.
different than Darwin's.
And to be clear, Darwin himself states that why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links, right? The intermediate links, the changes that you're saying took place over small periods of time. Apparently, we have a bunch of fossils that were able to exist 500 million years ago.
So he's talking about
this. But fossils don't last a very long time. We just conveniently. Okay, then why? Okay, just to be clear, let's read what he said. Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic change, and this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection that can be urged against my theory. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record. The geological record does not at all in any way demonstrate successfully what you're saying. It does not. The fossil record has been time and time again demonstrated as not proving it. There is one example.
Darwin doesn't understand geology at all. Like, let me explain why. What he's talking about is in the stratum. So now he's talking about over hundreds of millions of years. I was showing you transitionary fossils from a common ancestor of apes to humans, which only happened over a couple million years. But let me talk to you about, he's talking about the stratum. So he's talking about the hundreds of millions of years. So give me 5 seconds. I'm going to turn on the light. So over hundreds, he's saying like, okay, you look at, so you're in the Grand Canyon, right? You see different levels, right? Let's just say, right? What he's saying is why in between those stratum, why don't you see transitions in between the stratum? Why do you see completely different species in the bottom stratum and then completely different species in the top stratum and completely different species in those stratum, right? That's what he's saying in that quote, right? He's saying, why don't we see in-betweens, right? So the reason you don't see in-betweens is because of geological formation. So when the bottom stratum is made, there's a certain geological process that keeps that bedrock hard. We can get into geology. I'm gonna fuck up the name of the process right now, but let's say there's certain geological processes that happened 100 million years ago that creates this certain type of rock that's much more hard and stable over time, right? Then eventually, I forget what it is. It's like volcanoes or something, makes a dip, right? There's some change in how the geology is being formed. So the type of rock that's made is not rock that stays forever, right? So you're going to have, so if you're looking at the Grand Canyon, Keanu, you have at the bottom rock that's 800 million years old. And then the one right above it is rock that's 600 million years old. And the rock right above that is 100 million years old, because the certain geological processes that were happening that made the rock hard and stay only happens in certain time periods. So it's kind of like you were watching a film, right? You're recording, and then you stop recording, and then 200 million years passes, and then you start recording again. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about it in the stratum specifically. So he's not talking about it in like, that's what he knew. That's what he was looking at geologically. But that's the reason why you don't see between the stratum any transitionary rocks, because the rock at the bottom is 800 million years. Then the middle one is 600 million years. And the one on the top is 100 million years, right? So does that make sense? I don't know if you believe me or not.
I understand what you're saying makes sense. What I can tell you is that still doesn't address the fact that you cannot show me any examples other than showing me two different species that look similar of something transitioning. Even if we just use your example, you have millions of years to use as a frame of reference. You don't have any. And that's my question is, why don't we have any? Why don't we have any examples? Lucy was a great example. Do you all agree that Lucy has been a demonstrated example of humans evolving or coming from this common ancestor? Do you agree or disagree with that?
I don't know about Lucy specifically.
Seriously?
I feel like I've heard that name, but I don't remember anything about what Lucy specifically has to do. Like, I think was she the first one? I don't remember. Exactly.
She was the one that they found, right? So Lucy was Homo habilis, right, which is right before Homo erectus. So it's going back to a common ancestor that people are now. This discovery was meant to be the biggest discovery, saying that these were the animals that walked upright, and this is where we came from. This is demonstrative proof of humans coming from this common ancestor. That was what they were espousing, right? So Lucy was found in the 70s. And what they did is they said, well, there were footprints that look like human footprints. You guys can look this up, right? This Lucy, Homo habilis, like you can look this up. This is the story that they found in the 70s. Lucy is demonstrative proof. So what they did, they found a skeleton and said, well, there is human footprints nearby. Those human footprints obviously are demonstrative of the fact that this is the common ancestor. Why was this so big, Jonah? Why was this so big?
I don't know anything
because for the history, for hundreds of years, they have been trying to demonstrate actual evidence of the evolutionary process that you're telling me took place. Lucy was a big deal because they can't prove it. There is no proof. There are no clear examples of us transitioning from species to species. So when they found this in the 70s, they said, look, we have this example. Lucy, how do you not know this? Look this up.
Hold on. Is Lucy fake or is it not? I don't understand. Where are you going with this?
So
I know the name. I don't remember what she represented or anything like that. But I don't understand. So that's the example, and then it's fake. Like, I don't understand. Or is this the example? Or I don't get it. Like, what's your point?
Lucy is officially classified as a hominid, a predecessor of humankind. From her species later came Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and then Homo sapiens. Lucy is officially classified. We came from Lucy. Why? Because of all of the things that were found as it relates to her, right? So if you go back to Lucy, you'll see all kinds of, I'm assuming.
Okay, so wait, I don't understand. So is Lucy?
These are the pictures of Lucy using the same example that you sent to me, right? These are this is from.
Isn't this proving my point? I don't understand how this doesn't this
correct.
Prove there's a transitional fossil?
It sure is proving your point. Here's my point, bro. Here's my point. The point is the people who found her, it was two people, Donald Johanson and Tom Gray, were the two people that discovered her. Right? After 40 years of research, they found out that I believe it was only 30% of her was found. So just to be clear, science now states that Lucy is evidentiary proof that we evolved from this common ancestor. Why was this such a big deal? Because they still don't have proof. You keep espousing me theories. You're telling me examples and you're presenting them as obvious. You're using stories of birds and fruit flies that were failed stories that present changes within species, but no demonstrative change from one species to another. The thing you're trying to tell me happened. This thing that we are supposed to so clearly believe is obvious, they don't have any examples. No historical, no geological, no fossil evidence. None whatsoever exists of this. So when Lucy was found, they finally got excited and were like, this is crazy. We finally have proof. Because a bunch of Jonahs are out here saying this is true because it's obvious. And because everybody keeps saying it, we're believing it's true. But there's actually nothing evidentiary that can point to this being true. We have a bunch of assumptions. We have a bunch of conclusions, but nothing that actually clarifies it, right? So what they did is they found this. And they said there was human footprints. Well, then what they found out years later was that those footprints were miles away. The footprints were human footprints that were found miles away. I have links of this. The Lucy actually did not have foot bones. So they presented Lucy near footprints and said there's human footprints near this hominid. So clearly this is proof that we have a common ancestor. Lucy is the missing link. Lucy was actually referred to as the missing link in museums all over the place. What they found out later is that these footprints that they said were human footprints not only were miles away from where Lucy was, but Lucy didn't have feet. Lucy was found as a skeleton without feet. But you know what they did find? A bunch of other feet nearby, not directly associated, but those feet were curved, much more like a chimpanzee. They also found out 40 years later that Lucy was actually a male. And fun fact, they tried to change it to Lucifer.
All
right?
We are around 40 minutes. We should wrap it up for this one. And
we gotta do Q&A, Keanu.
Yeah, hold on. So let me finish this point, right? It doesn't make sense for us to stop without actually finalizing a point. So what they found out is, okay, so one, you presented Lucy as the missing link. You presented Lucy as evidence that we come from a common ancestor. And this was a big deal because you have no other evidence. You have conjecture. You have assumptions. You have stories. You have no evidence. There is no evidence. There's no fossil evidence. None of it is there. So they find Lucy and say, Lucy is proof of the missing link because there was human footprints nearby. Then you find out those human footprints were miles away. Then you find out Lucy actually didn't have feet. Then you find out that Lucy was actually a dude. They tried to name him Lucifer, and that's not a joke, right? And then on top of that, they found out that there was a bunch of other feet found by, and those feet actually resembled chimpanzee. Well, here's what's worse. Lucy is showed standing up, right? This is in a museum. Lucy is being shown standing up. In the museums, Lucy is shown as standing up because Lucy is sold to us as the missing link. If you look it up, Owen Lovejoy, who's an anthropologist, actually made a copy of Lucy's hip bones, sawed off the hip bones so that she looked like she was standing upright. Lucy was essentially just a chimpanzee with that's really all it was. But what science did was made this presentation and allowed this presentation, still allows this presentation to be demonstrated that Lucy's the missing link that demonstrates that we have a common ancestor. When the reality is when you look at the skull fractures that they have, because all they have is fractures, you look at the feet that they found nearby, what you find is that once again, the scientific evidence that demonstrates the proof that you're trying to tell me is obvious actually doesn't exist. It was just a chimpanzee that they manipulated, sawed to make stand upright. The pictures that you showed me that have been taught in our schools of the march of progression, that have been proven later. Those are just monkeys. Those are monkeys and not humans, right? They told us this, but they were loud about their presentation that this is the example of history. But in the spine print, they said, actually, none of these things are standing up. We look at it because we see it standing up and assume that it's obvious representation of evolution. But even in the book, it said none of these were standing up. They were all crouching over. Then later we realized, actually, none of us are even related at all.
Why does it matter whether they were crouching over or not?
Because
let's just say humans were the first ones to be bipedal. Why does that make any difference?
Because there is a clear and obvious agenda by the scientific community, let's call it. Maybe because they have a bias to support a belief system. I don't know.
No, but I just don't think it makes any difference. I don't think it makes any difference whether they were crouching or standing up. You can still see just, unless you think these are just fake. That's why I'm trying to understand. Do you think these fossils are fake? Like when they showed that march of progression,
they're
do you
monkeys.
Think there are no fossils?
They're monkeys. They're not human.
Okay,
and those monkeys have no connection to humans. No. There's no demonstration that they became humans.
My issue is humans are monkeys. That's the thing that you don't get. We are all different types of monkeys, whether you like it or not. So what it's showing is that what it's showing is, unless you believe these fossils to just be fake, which I don't think you're claiming, that there was a gradual progression. But anyway, let's go, dude. We're going back and forth. Let's go to the Q&A.
Let's go to it.
Do that part.
Do a second episode with a little bit more preparation about this.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
Let's go to the Q&A. Who's got questions?
I don't think anybody has
anyone have any questions?
We gotta reshare the link, I think.
Well, wait. Does anyone want to? You can either come up here or you can ask questions in the comments. We want to give some questions if you guys have questions for us that didn't make any sense, right? We can also look in here too.
There were
I don't
plenty
think there is
of
any.
DNA
Daniel, the Q, leader of QAnon? Maybe. I'd believe
Maybe.
it.
Have you ever seen me and the leader of QAnon in the same room?
I believe it.
You know what I mean? Jeremy tried to say that you've never seen Jeremy and Jonah in the same room. So
True.
maybe it's
No, we did a podcast together.
I don't think we really have any questions here. I don't think anybody really cares with the questions. Here's my point, man. My point that I'm saying beforehand is the same point that I'm saying, dude. All you're presenting is examples of people adapting within species. You have yet to present any example of us changing from another species to the current species. Science doesn't support it. The person who espoused this theory said that it's an issue. All of science have proclaimed that it's an issue. There is no existence of anything that demonstrates transition. All we have is independent creatures in the fossil record. That's it. We don't have any evidence of a creature becoming a different creature. There is not one example in the fossil record of a creature becoming a different creature. We have a bunch of examples of creatures existing. We have a bunch of examples of those creatures staying within species. There's no examples of them changing to something else.
I'm just going to ask this one question again. I think we're just going to disagree because I don't know what you would need to, in your head counts as a transition. Because you could argue it's like, no, that's a monkey. That's not a monkey human. That's a monkey, right? I don't know when a monkey changes into a human. Scientifically, humans are monkeys, basically, right? We have things like the muscle that I talked about, like the, what's it called? The palmaris longus.
Oh,
that we find
show
in
me
other
an example
monkeys.
of something going from a fish, right?
That's not how it happens. You don't, we don't come from fish. What happens is we come from a common ancestor. So there's something that's neither a fish nor a human that then slowly changes into both.
And I'm assuming that in that transition, those things died, yes?
No, they changed. They didn't.
So they just never died. They just
everything dies.
And became questions?
Well, no, they didn't die. Well, everything dies. So eventually they died. But
so give me an example of one, just one. Just one. Show me one, Jonah. One. We have billions of years of opportunity for you to find me one skeleton that represents what you're telling me had happened for billions of years. And if the best you can do,
what I don't understand is how is Homo erectus? Wait, in your opinion, so just tell me, why does Homo erectus not count as a transitionary stage?
You're showing me a picture. You're showing me a skeleton of a monkey, and you're showing me a skeleton of a human. You're not showing me a skeleton of a monkey becoming a human.
Wait a minute.
Also, DQ Mark Corchin.
Bro, what I'm trying to understand is that you're not going to see in a fossil it changing. You understand that, right? The fossil itself is not going to be a change, right?
Yes, so there has to be. Jonah,
no.
How
one fossil doesn't change into another fossil, right? So what I'm asking you is what type of fossil would convince you it's like a quote unquote monkey human? That's what I don't understand. Is because it's like, okay, here's the progression. These fossils exist. You don't deny the existence of fossils. You're like, no, these are just monkeys. Define what makes a monkey versus a human in this context. Because do you get what I'm asking at least?
I just don't feel how I feel like I'm being really clear and explaining. Jamarco, help me understand what I'm missing here. Right? If
I don't know what is a monkey human fossil, let's say.
Okay,
if you have billions of years,
a transition between the two, John is asking.
Okay,
what's something that is in the middle between a monkey and a human? Or
no, I'm not talking about monkey or human. I'm talking about forget the monkey human thing because he's just going to go back to showing me pictures of monkeys and humans that look similar and say this is a clear example of evolution. But I just showed you a picture of humans that have really, really pronounced eyebrow bones, right? That you literally take this dude's skull and you're talking about deformities.
But that's my point, Quijano. My point is what would be, because every single fossil I'd ever show you, you're just going to say it's a fucking monkey. So show me one more.
No, forget monkeys, dude. Forget monkeys. You have billions of years before humans.
Okay, so
you're telling me that everything transitioned and evolved from something else. Fantastic. Show me one example of two things becoming something else. I can give you examples that evolution tries to espouse, and I can also debunk those examples pretty simply. Because once again,
I just don't. I don't under like what I want to know, Quijano. So like, just humor me. What are you expecting? What counts as a transitionary fossil? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Jonah, I don't understand. Be clear, bro. I'm going to answer you. I'm going to say this one more time.
No. Wait. Let me explain my confusion first.
Okay.
I show you what we think is a transitionary fossil. You just say no. That's full monkey. That's not any part human whatsoever. And then what I'm trying to understand from your perspective is, okay, what would count as a transitionary fossil versus
I can answer that.
This
is a simple question. I will answer it again. You ready?
Sure. Yes.
You keep going back to just using a human transitionary fossil. I'm saying let's leave that example alone because I believe you're just showing me a fossil of a monkey next to a fossil of a human and saying, see, they transitioned.
No, okay, my point is you'll say that about any example I give you.
Okay, so hold on. But you haven't given me one. What I'm saying is forget humans for 5 seconds. Forget humans. Because before humans, according to your argument, we had like 4 billion years of changes. We had 4 billion years of transitions. Surely you can find me one other example. Because if all of these things evolved, you can show me clear examples of, well, this animal, what they're telling us is this became this, and this became this. Okay, well, how long did it take for this to become this? 1 billion years. Okay, so that means for 1 billion years, there was a bunch of in-between transitions where it was becoming something different. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't this. It was becoming something different for 1 billion years. Right?
But show me an example. I'm gonna show you the example, and then you're gonna be like, no, those are all just gazelle. And then I'm gonna be like, bro, when does a gazelle not become a gazelle?
You keep saying that you have not presented. So I will present an example for you. Here's one example that a lot of people use. This is the most common example that evolutionists present. I don't know why I got to present your argument for you, but I'll present one for you, bro. Cretaceous, hippopotamus and whales. Hippopotamus and whales are one of the go-to examples that evolutionists use to demonstrate clearly these are the same thing. Why? Because cetaceans and whales have a lot of similarities. They both give birth underground. They both breathe with lungs. They both communicate with their young underwater. And so what they say is that because those things are true, clearly a hippopotamus became a whale. Right? That was the evolutionary process. Hippopotamus went from the water and then from the land, and then they went to, we can talk about that in a second. They went from the water. And Mark, you've asked 2 questions. I want to address them both. I just didn't want to, we're having a hard time jumping around. So finishing points. So I'll definitely want to answer your questions. So hippopotamus were land animals. They evolved and then they went in the water. And then that evolved into whales. And that's where we got whales. Whales used to be land mammals. This is what evolutionists demonstrate as their attempt to answer the question that I'm presenting to you. And this is what they say. If you look at the inside of a flipper of a whale, it looks like the bones of a hand. Okay. Problem is, hippopotamus don't have hands. So that's the first thing that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Secondarily, you're just giving me comparisons, and this is what they say. And guys, you can look this up, right? Go to YouTube, and you can say, go to YouTube, and you can just say, hippopotamus to whale, evolutions for whales. Just do evolution for whales. You'll see 100 videos that demonstrate this. And here's what they demonstrate. This is what they say. Hippopotamus communicate with their young underwater. They have lungs. They do all of these different things. Whales do all of these different things. They're all mammals. They don't have hair. They give all of these examples of similarities. And then they say, because they're similar, obviously that's evidence that they evolved. Okay. And to my response, I'll say this. I hear you, but then that is the same as me saying, you got 2 blonde people. They both have blue eyes. They both speak with a German accent. They both have pronounced eyebrows, right? They both have pointy nose. They're both 6 feet tall. Is it silly for me to assume that they have the same father, Jonah?
Well, no, but the whales and dolphins don't have the same father.
No, I'm trying to use a metaphor, Jonah.
I know, but I'm showing you where your metaphor breaks down.
My point is this: could they have the same father?
A human could, but whales and dolphins don't. But yet they have all these similarities.
I'm gonna ask this question to you, Jamarco, because Jonah's just trying to be complicated. Jamarco, if I see two people,
I mean that's why your metaphor doesn't make any sense. But okay, whatever.
The metaphor makes sense if you're listening to it without a filter. And the problem is you can't hear any of the points that I'm presenting because you're not listening to them without a filter. You're listening to them like already with the preconceived idea that your option is right. I told you I would be willing to listen to something that you demonstrate to me that demonstrates that you can present something that proves that evolution, that give me an example that demonstrates that we came from something else. You have one thing you've done very well is demonstrated that things.
Hold on. There's really one big problem though. Let's just pretend for a second. Let's just take a hypothetical.
Okay.
Let's just say I had like 1,000 fossils, very clearly, very defining. I don't, right? Very clearly defining like a progression, right?
Okay.
You could eat what I feel like you're doing is you're saying, Jonah, no, this is obviously a dolphin at stage 2, right? What I'm saying is the problem is that let's say I had 1,000, right? And you're like, Jonah, that stage 2 dolphin right before a human, that's just a human. And the middle one, that's just a monkey. So actually, you're wrong. None of these are transitional fossils. They're all different, completely different species. And the thing is, you're right. They are completely different species, right? So the issue that I'm having is that you won't accept anything that's a transitional fossil, even if I present it, even if like we 100% knew that this came from this. Let's just say we actually observed the millions of years and I still showed you the fossil. You still be like the step right before humans. You're like, no, that's a monkey, right? That just looks like a human, right? But you Jonah, get my issue?
Yeah, I hear you, but what I'm asking you is for examples. So when I demonstrated,
no, but like I gave you examples, and you're like, no, that's a monkey, not a human. What I'm saying is that that's what I think you're doing. You're like
something else other than monkeys and humans. Can you? Yes or no? You keep saying you could, but then you're not going to.
That was the one I prepared for. I can look up the whales and the dolphins.
There's billions of years of options for you to choose from. This should be very simple, Jonah.
Okay, okay, so let's go into how rare is it?
We're going to have to circle back. DQ, do you want to answer those 2 questions?
I do.
And get to
here's the thing, and I'm going to answer that. But just to say this, right? To be clear, both of those things that you start seeing and
I just don't think you'd accept anything as a transitional fossil.
You can't find one. Jonah. The thing you're
but I think I could but like hold on. Even if let's just for 5 seconds assume evolution is real. Just for 5 seconds. Just for 5 seconds. Assume evolution is real. I show you a fossil that evolution is real. Let's say we don't know evolution is real, but like evolution is real. Just take this hypothetical with me for a second.
Okay, I got you. I'm with you.
Okay. This fossil is the species right before humans. Okay? I present that to you. Okay? You say to me, Jonah, that's a monkey, that's not a transitionary period between anything with monkeys and humans. And I'm like, no, but it is. Like, I don't know how to explain it to you. You don't think this is a transitionary period, but this is a transitionary fossil. Do you understand the problem? Where it's I could show you the fossil and you could easily just say no monkey. And then it's like, okay, where are we left at? So that's the issue with this whole argument. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Where it's like that, I could show you fossils and you're just gonna be like, no monkey. And if I show you with the dolphins, you're gonna be like, no dolphin, not hippopotamus or whatever, right? Because what makes the difference of a species is not how it looks, it's whether it can breed and create offspring that can also make more offspring. That's the definition of a species. So this whole argument is going to be dumb because I'll show you any fossil and you'll always say, no, that's a monkey. That's not a dolphin. If I give you any example, I can look up.
No. You started with a question and then you converted to a conclusion. So you're speaking for me.
I'm not saying. Did I ask a question? I mean, my point was that do you see my point now though of like why this doesn't make sense?
I do. I just think your point's incomplete. So can I respond? Can I address? Sure. Can I respond to your point? And then I want to answer your dad's questions. Because I think he has 2 very good questions. So Number one,
I need more water.
you've deflected multiple times saying, okay, let's use this hypothetical example that evolution definitely was real. Okay, let's use that same example. Like evolution is definitely real. You tell me that, well, if evolution was definitely real, I could just refute every piece of evidence you present to me. I could see that. Here's the thing. And I'm not going to ask you questions alone anymore because you have evaded every one of my questions without question. You have sideswiped all my questions.
I completely answered the Darwin one fully directly. That's
you did answer Darwin directly, right?
Yeah.
But that wasn't even a question.
Never say always. Assumptions make an ass out of you and me.
You're right. I overgeneralized, and I apologize to you. Okay, but I'm gonna ask. Here's my questions. I'm gonna ask my questions to everybody. We're wrapping this thing up. I'm gonna ask for class participation, right? I don't need to be right, but I want to hear actual examples. I want to hear from you, Jamarco. Guys, give me your answer in the chat. I genuinely am curious to hear your perspective on this. Let's assume evolution is real. It's unequivocated. Would you agree or disagree that we would have more than 1 or 2 or 5 obvious examples of fossils that are in transition? Not already complete individual, but halfway between 2 different species. Now, because they're halfway between 2 different species, that transitionary species, we would have a fossil for it, but it would no longer exist because it died because of natural selection, and natural selection said it needs to become this new species. So my question to you guys, if we got billions of years of examples and we know for a fact that evolution is true, should we not have more than 2 or 3 or 5 examples in the fossil record confirming a picture that paints this narrative? Would you agree or disagree with that? I would love to hear everybody's responses.
All right. So the answer to that is, first of all, we have to see where those stratums that he was speaking about, how they form, right? Because he said volcano can be involved, a lot of things can be involved. So maybe some of the record is destroyed and we really don't see it, right? It seems a little too convenient as an answer, right? So on one hand, I want to give you the fact that I've seen no proof of that in my lifetime. Maybe there is out there, maybe I'm missing it. So I would like to see how the process of how a fossil is created, make sure I completely understand how that is created, and then we can apply it to, one, how big were these populations back then?
So wait, hold on, I gotta ask because I want to get clear, right? You made a comment. You have never seen an example. I have never seen an example, and I would argue science has never seen an example. They make assumptions about things they've seen and call them examples. They've never seen an example. That's why Lucy was a big deal, because they thought Lucy was an example, and then they found out that Lucy was not. I don't think science has an example, my opinion, right? You're saying you have not seen an example. Lewis says that he agrees. Do you agree or disagree, or do you not have an answer? Because nobody else is giving me an answer for this.
Can I give an answer to your question?
Yeah, please. I just wanted to hear Jamarco's answer before you.
I would like to see these 2 factors, and then I can tell you're right. But
so you don't have an answer.
I don't have an answer because I don't have all the knowledge. I have to have all the facts.
Can I answer your question, Keanu?
Of course.
The thing is that there's no such thing as a transitionary species. They're just different species, right? That's the issue that I think we're running into here, is there isn't a transitionary species between a fish and a human, let's just say, right? There are just species that are slowly changing over time. So we can't tell this from fossil records, but let's just say we see a bunch of clams. Let's just say, to our eyes, they look like clams, right? In the fossils, right? You're going to tell me, you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, Jonah, those are just all different species of clams, right? And I'm going to be like, well, no, we've done the DNA evidence and blah, 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 showing that actually this is an earlier form of that clam. And then you're going to be like, no, it's the same species, right? Because they both look like clams, right? So the issue is that you won't believe any of them are transitionary fossils because they don't, quote unquote, look like transitionary fossils. but that doesn't mean it's not a transitionary fossil.
So you're using really, I understand what you're saying, and that's a solid response. If I'm being fair, here's where I don't think it's a fair response, because it doesn't actually represent the story that you're trying to paint happened.
Well, can I say what it does?
Scientific one. No, it doesn't. I'll use a scientific one, right? Now it may to a degree. Well, I'll use a different one. Let me not say it doesn't. Let me just use a different one.
Sure.
So Dr. Richard Sternberg, you guys can Google him. I'll put his name in the chat. Dr. Richard Sternberg. He's a researcher for the Smithsonian. Another guy who's got a little bit of a resume, right? He's actually done the research on the example that I gave you, right? So what did I say from the very beginning, guys? I don't study to prove myself right. I study to prove myself wrong. And then I look at the information objectively and see if, in fact, it's successful at doing so. And what I see every single solitary time you look at someone espousing evolution is they present information, and then they present a hypothesis, and then assume that their hypothesis is right because it's the most logical assumption. Okay. But the fact that it's their opinion, the most logical assumption, in and of itself isn't enough for it to become fact or true or be taught in our schools. Because I could come up with another equally logical assumption. You can't tell me that carries more weight. We have to acknowledge that the conclusions you draw based on these two pieces of evidence are in fact assumptions. They're hypotheses, they're conclusions, not evidence, not fact. So when I went trying to see if I could find evidence for evolution, what I saw was this common theme. And the common thing was two pieces of evidence and then conclusions, assumptions of how they come together. And I'm like, yeah, but you keep making these assumptions. And that assumption is no different than seeing two people that look alike and assuming they have the same dad. That's not how biology works. It's a logical deduction, but that doesn't make it fact. So when I looked into this, I looked at what are the examples that they have. They have to have some examples to come to these conclusions. One of the more popular ones, there's a handful. The bird one is the one that you presented. There's an iguana study. There's a couple of fruit fly studies. And one of the biggest go-tos for evolutionists when it comes to demonstrating transition in the fossil record is hippopotamus to whale. That's one of the biggest go-tos. You go to evolutionists, you're trying to evade this question like it's not a valid question. But just because you're calling it invalid doesn't mean that it's not.
What question? What's the question?
Give me demonstrations of fossils that are in transition. What I'm saying is the scientific community recognizes this is a valid question, Jonah. Scientists have debated this for years. This is a valid question. It is a hugely debated question. And I promise you, they have gone to bat. Scientists on both sides of this have fought for, you can go look up how many debates for this. This is an overwhelmingly valid question. Just because maybe I'm not doing the best job of presenting, or maybe you're just not hearing it properly, I promise you this is a valid question. Go listen to other scientists. And I promise you there are many, many scientists who have debated that your lack of evidence in this destroys your theory of evolution. It carries no water. And it's one of the foundational things. Scientists that are proponents for the theory of evolution have gone to bat to try to demonstrate evidence that this is real. I just named you a couple of examples of doctors that have destroyed this theory time and time again, who understand this far more than all of us put together, right? One of the examples that are people who are proponents for evolution is the hippopotamus to whale example. The evolution of whales is their go-to story. And so what they say is, this is what they say, the similarities between hippopotamus and whales and the presentation of bones that look like they don't serve a purpose, right? Now, this is the whole conversation of junk DNA, which we won't go too much into, right? But I will touch on it a little bit when I answer your dad's question. This is what's called comparative anatomy. You guys can Google this. It's called comparative anatomy. Comparative anatomy is an example that evolutionists use to try to prove their point. And the hippopotamus to whale example is one picture they point to say there is proof in the fossil record because of comparative anatomy. There's two issues with that. To support comparative anatomy, you have to support the need for junk DNA. Junk DNA has largely been refuted, right? Comparative anatomy requires junk DNA be real. What's junk DNA? the existence of things that no longer serve a purpose. A tailbone
What I was
and
talking
appendix.
about, the vestigial
Correct.
muscle.
Those, that's what's referred to in genetics as junk DNA. You're telling me that the existence of those things is demonstrative of evolution. Well, in order for that to be true, junk DNA, which is what the genetic name for that thing happens to be, has to also be true. Genetics has, however, disproven junk DNA. Time and time again, these things that we say are
why does junk, okay.
Junk DNA, a tailbone in a human is an example of junk DNA. An appendix is an example of junk DNA. The hand that looks like a hand in a flipper in a whale is an example of junk DNA. This is evolutionists' attempt at saying, you see these things, they don't need them. They serve a purpose. They serve no purpose. They're obviously representative.
This is one argument for evolution.
Correct. So this represents something they used to need. They don't need it anymore. Clear example of evolution. Well, DNA is proving that's not true.
How?
Because what you're calling that is junk DNA, and genetics is learning that what we used to think was useless actually serves a purpose. PubMed just did a study within recent 5 years testing I don't know how many different strains of what used to be considered junk DNA, and have found that junk DNA that science is saying used to be evidence for evolution is in fact not evidence for evolution. It's not junk DNA at all. That DNA is actually supportive amino acids that serve a purpose we didn't just realize. I'll give a very simple example. Tonsils. For years, we used to remove tonsils in kids because we knew for a fact that tonsils served no purpose. With the same assurity you're telling me that tailbones and appendix serve no purpose, doctors and scientists said that tonsils serve no purpose until they realized that tonsils were one of a gigantic defense mechanism for the human immune system. So what we called unnecessary and a representation of junk DNA from the transition from one species to another that tells us that this thing that we don't need proves that we came from something else actually doesn't mean that at all. And genetics is starting to learn time and time again that the things we think we don't need actually represent overwhelmingly useful things in the makeup of the species in which these things are found, including a tonsil. So a tonsil is a very obvious example.
Can I respond to this?
Yeah. So I'll wrap up here in like 60 seconds. You can respond to whatever you want. So then this is my point. So we talked about a lot. I didn't want to go into DNA, but I wanted to answer your dad's question. So that would be my response to your question, Mr. Jonah. I'm calling him Mr. Jonah because I forgot his first name. I think it's Mark.
Mr.
Sorry,
Mr. Okay. Scorchin Corchin to you.
Scorchin Corchin. Forgive me, sir.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah. So let me summarize what originally started me there. I combined my answer to his question to this point because they were related.
Time this fool. He's spoken for like 7 minutes.
You're right.
I'm like, goddamn, dude, chill.
First of all, my bad. Second of all, thank you for letting me speak. I will wrap this up in 60 seconds. Jamarco, mute me if I don't finish in 60 seconds. All right? Mute me. So here's the final point, right? So now we're getting a picture. Evolutionists say, well, because there's similarities, obviously it's evolution. This stuff, you don't need it. Genetics is proving time and time again that's not true. Whales, that transition for whales is a great example. And this is my final point that I'll make. Do you know how many, it may take longer because I'm going to ask him questions. Do you know how many genetic transitions, Jonah, are necessary in order for a whale to have been fully executed to transition in evolution? Geneticists have 10 to 20,000 genetic traits would have had to have been changed. 10 to 20,000 genetic traits would have had to have been changed. Do you know how long that would take mathematically for 10 to 20,000 traits to be changed according to the current scientific understanding of evolution?
I mean, I would say this. Biology doesn't change based on math only. It changes based on science and what actually happens. But I don't know mathematically.
Okay, but geneticists do. The geneticists who believe in the thing that you're saying do. And they have numbers for this. Okay. And what they've said is that for two genetic traits, changing the tail fluke on the back of a whale, changing from what they would have been to make that tail do that is simply a change of 2 genetic traits. Geneticists have done this math.
Okay.
Do you want to take a ballpark guess as to how long it would have taken for the tail fluke change, according to geneticists who support the theory of evolution?
No, I want you to tell me because you're taking hell of a
43
long.
million years. 43 million years.
Okay.
It would have taken, according to geneticists' understanding of evolution, 2 genetic traits, slow, gradual changes over time. Those 2 genetic traits, according to common understanding, current understanding, not Darwinism, current understanding of genetics, 2 traits, 43 million years. There's 10 to 20,000 traits for a full evolution of a whale to take place. There was not mathematically enough time in the history of evolution for a whale to evolve. There is not mathematically enough time.
Wait,
Current
what?
genetics proves that.
I don't understand even what you're saying. There's been more than 43 million years in time.
That was
So
for
there's
2
been enough
genetic
time.
traits. That's for a tail, bro.
So
That's 2.
what do you
There's
mean?
10 to 20,000 genetic traits that would have been required. So take that 2, multiply it by 10,000.
Well, wait, hold on. I like genetic traits. I don't know this argument at all. I don't really understand.
I know,
Like, I
but
sort
you
of
believe
understand
in
what you're
it like
saying,
it's
but
true.
that doesn't really make. Like, I don't really get what you're saying.
And here's my
really.
simple response. My point is this, Jonah, and I want to hear whatever response you have. The fact that you're not familiar with any of these things, and
Yeah.
I, a person who does not support evolution, know about all of this stuff because I've studied both arguments, and I'm telling you the arguments of geneticists who support evolution.
When
But
you
then I'm
say
telling you the
genetic trait, do you
counter-argument.
mean the tail itself? What do you mean by a genetic trait?
There is 10 to 20,000 estimated genetic changes that need to take place.
Because I want you to be
Genetic-
specific right now. Genes, a genetic trait, what that means is the tail itself.
No,
Okay.
that
What do you
is
mean?
the DNA that codes what and who you are has to change according to the theory of evolution. The
Mhm.
traits within that double helix need to
Right.
evolve, right?
It needs to
Because
change. Correct.
humans are one thing. Well, a genetic trait is blonde hair and blue eyes. These genetic traits.
Right. You're
So
talking
if
about
there's-
what's that called an
Correct.
allele.
So
Yeah.
in order for the genetic traits to change enough for an entire animal, a whale, to come into an existence from something previous, like a hippopotamus, there is required genetically 10 to 20,000 genetic traits need to evolve in order for that full transition to take place. This is modern day science challenging evolution and telling you mathematically how long this would take to take place. They estimated it would take 42 million years for the tail to get created, let alone the rest of it. And that's just representative of 2 genetic traits.
You're acting like why can't all of it change at once? Why can't it all
Because
be
that's not how
changing at the same
genetics
time?
works.
Why not?
Well,
All of
ask
every single
geneticists.
every single part can be changing at any given point. That's what I wasn't understanding.
Poof. So what you're
No,
saying is
but like,
it's not
no,
small
but like,
gradual
No,
changes.
but like,
It's
but my
poof,
blue, no,
or
no,
something
hold on.
different.
My blue eye, just because my eyes are changing from blue to green, although this is a really bad example, just because my eyes are changing from blue to green doesn't also mean that my foot isn't gaining an extra toe, right? Those things can be
Jamarco-
happening at the same time. But can
Jamarco,
I respond to your whole point?
please
Is
do,
that
please do,
okay?
please do,
Okay.
please do.
Here's the whole point, right? I'm gonna only respond to 2 things because you talk for so long. I can't respond to all of it. No offense. The only one I'm going to respond to is with the vestigial structures. That's what you're talking about with your appendix and all of that stuff. Just because we've found uses for tonsils now doesn't mean that the ones we don't know still aren't useless. They still could be useless and still could be useful for evolution. For instance, the palmaris longus that I was talking about. Still don't we don't use that muscle ever. I could dissect it from you and you could still, or I could surgically remove it from you and you could still perfectly fine rock climb or do anything like that, right? It doesn't, just because we don't know, or just because we know certain things now, doesn't mean that the ones we don't know still doesn't give evidence to evolution. So that's just a faulty logic there a little bit, because those things actually might be useless, right? So just to start off, that's 1. 2 is the overarching point. Any one point of the evidence doesn't definitively prove evolution. All of them together point to evolution. The fact that you don't see newer strata in the older strata, the fact that we're genetically similar to, we have the exact same genomes as, not the exact same, but we have a certain percentage of the exact same genomes as all other species, right? All of the evidence, the fact that we have the Palmaris longus, which you could literally surgically remove, Quijano, and nothing would happen to you, right?
You could have
You'd be
removed the
totally
tonsils
fine.
and they thought that nothing would happen either. And then they found out later.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean, just because that one actually did have a purpose doesn't mean that the Palmaris longus definitely does have a purpose.
And even whether just because that is unknown doesn't mean we came from different animals.
Okay, but listen,
You're right. My bad, Jonah. My bad, Jonah. I'm sorry.
It's all good. So, going through every single point, right? The fact that we don't, the strata thing, the DNA thing, the Palmaris longus thing, and what else do I got? All of the different points together all point towards the theory of evolution. I would say they don't really point to creationism at all. They don't really whatsoever. We could do another one where it could point to a different theory, but it's really the only theory that can explain all of these different phenomena well, right? So if you want to argue that, like, hey, you haven't definitively proved evolution, right? It's like a 1,000,000-year-old process. So since I can't see it, right, I'm not going to be able to, you can't definitively show me a species transitioning, right? Because you argued it's over millions of years and therefore I can't observe it, right? I'm like, okay, but there's plenty of things in science we can't fully observe. We can't observe what's on we know what's inside the earth, but we can't go to the middle of the earth, right? It is just using the evidence that we have and the phenomena that we see is most likely explained by this theory, because all other theories show you would expect different things, right? We can argue about that at a different time. That's my argument in the end. I'll look more into if we've ever seen a species turn into another species. That would be interesting to know. I don't think we have. I think you've done a really good job to show that we haven't observed it in a single lifetime. Just to give you your credit where credit is due. But yeah, like, I just don't think any other theory explains all of these different things. And we can predict, and we also predict different things that do happen. For instance, antibiotic resistance, right? So it's interesting how you believe in adaptation. It's interesting that you believe in adaptation when really adaptation is evolution happening slowly, or is like the beginnings of evolution, because evolution is just changing over time, right? And my point is that all of these things are all happen to be able to be explained pretty well by one theory. And so and we could talk, and this could be a good segue into the next one, unless there's another theory where could be able to figure out these different things, right? Then we would go with the evolution if that explains it better, right? I think these things do support evolution in the end, but you think it supports like a different theory, right? So it's just kind of like these phenomena we're seeing are all pretty well explained by evolution. True, I can't show you in a single lifetime right now definitively that evolution definitely 100% happens, but it's like the only theory where it explains all of these different phenomena really well, because all the other theories, you'd see different things, right? So we could talk about that another time, but like, it's the only one that explains all of these different points of evidence well. Every other theory doesn't. So I think that's what you were going to get at, where you're like, you can't prove to me that evolution exists. And it's like, okay, but there's there's way more evidence that this is the right theory than any other theory. That's, I guess, my end argument on that, in the sense that I'll say that you've done a really good job of showing me that you can't definitively prove it, but I still believe there's more overwhelming amount of evidence for this theory, because this theory very well explains every single phenomena that we're seeing, right? That's how I would end this. You can respond to that, but I don't have much more to say. I'm like losing my voice. We're at like 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I'm tired and hungry.
I know, right? I was tired before I started. I barely slept last night, so I was tired when we started, but we pushed through. So here's my response to all that, bro. Here's my response to all that. I appreciate you giving credit where credit's due. I'm a little disappointed personally at where you gave credit. But let me return the favor, right? I think here's the thing, Jonah. I don't think any of the points that you made are necessarily wrong. I think the conclusions you draw about your points are. I think what I predicted at the beginning of this podcast or yesterday when I talked to you proved true. You had your mind made up about what this means, and everything I said was going to go in one ear and out the other, and you were going to say, yeah, but still, look at what I'm saying, right? Because here's the fact. I demonstrated scientifically proven examples of why comparative anatomy fails to demonstrate evolution as a process, meaning that we came from different species to another's, from one species to another, right? And your response was, yeah, but, right? Every time I presented scientifically, to be clear, guys, none of this stuff is just conclusions that I came to. Obviously, some of them might be, but everything I presented are extremely renowned, well-established scientists who have done lots and lots of data to prove this. This isn't just, hey, I looked up evolution and here's what evolution says, so obviously it's real. There are extremely credible and established scientists who have time and time again, I can paste their names in here. You guys can DM me and I'll give you the names. And they have all scientifically, with their degrees and their pedigree, demonstrated the same thing that I'm saying. And the same information that you're like, yeah, well, but still, look at that thing in our arm. So obviously, right? And that's my concern. When we approach information with the intent to respond, then we're not going to learn anything. We're just going to leave with what we already believed and have debated a point. And I feel like that's what happened. Now, here's the problem. I still agree with every point that you made. I don't think that any of the points that you made were wrong in and of themselves. What I think is wrong, and I'm going to asterisk that because maybe you said something I disagree with, but overall, I think what's wrong, in my opinion, is the conclusions you draw. One thing you have not done today at all, one time, is demonstrate any examples whatsoever, other than obviously it's clear because look at what it looks like. You've drawn conclusions, but you have not demonstrated one example of something transitioning in the billions of years we've been in existence from one thing to another. Scientists don't have one. Science doesn't have one. You did not present one because they don't exist.
Can I respond to just that one thing? I know I'm interrupting you. Like, what would be, like, let's just say, like, okay, like, what would the fossil look like? Or how would we know the fossil is a transitionary
Let's use Lucy.
Fossil?
Let's use Lucy as an example.
Why is Lucy considered a transitionary fossil and none of the other ones?
Because Lucy was, I'm using Lucy as an example because Lucy was presented as the fossil. Again, science has yet to produce the missing link that demonstrates we've evolved from species to species. All you've demonstrated is evolution within species. Well, I agree with you that happens. I've never disagreed that evolution happens within species. Humans are an example of that. Look at people with tans in different parts of the country versus people with lighter, fairer skin. Evolution within species is well established. Nobody's debating that. And all you've done today with every point that you've made is confirm that. Well, we already know that. But what you're saying you believe is that we've evolved from species to species, and nothing that you demonstrated presents that. Lucy was supposed to be the example of that. And then we found out that it was manipulated, it was lied, a bunch of crap was lied.
But what about Lucy makes Lucy different?
Because Lucy was an example that demonstrates we have no history of this thing existing, but clearly it demonstrates that it's not human, it's not this, it's this transitionary thing.
No, but
now, I think that by it. So here's the thing. If you could demonstrate that repeatedly, pick anything in life, Jonah. This is where common sense comes into play, right?
Wait,
I'm answering your question, bro.
Transitionary. That's my question. Versus anything else.
Let me repeat what I said. I'm not saying. No, Mark, I'm still waiting for you guys to present one example. I'm just looking for one. Mark, I would love to see one.
Wait, ignore my dad for a second.
I'm answering your question.
Answer my question.
Here's my answer. To repeat myself, I don't think Lucy is. Your question was what would have. And the reason I used Lucy as an example is here's my answer. Lucy, if Lucy was real, would have been an example that history had not found. So if you took that and then you combined it with throughout the generations, multiple examples that demonstrate that, what you're demonstrating to me is consistency.
Wait, hold on.
Of evolution.
You still aren't answering my question though. Just take Lucy. Assume Lucy is real. What about Lucy makes her transitional?
I feel like I've answered that again. Lucy doesn't represent anything transitional.
What would represent a transitional fossil? What would I be like? Okay, here's the fossil, and this is transitionary, and you believe this is transitionary. Do you understand what? Give me an example. Just give me a fake example that would prove to you, be like, okay, this is a transitionary fossil. This has this quality.
I don't, one would not suffice, bro. I would need multiple examples over years. I don't know what one would look like.
Guys,
that's my point. If I am showing you what I think are transitionary fossils, and you're like, no, this is a fucking monkey. My point is that I show you these fossils that are transitionary, and you're like, no, it's not. It's just a fucking monkey.
I'm going to repeat my answer one more time. Guys, in the chat, tell me if I'm answering this clearly. My answer is one example is not sufficient, bro. I would need one example, and then I'd need another one over another generation. I would need billions of years of transitionary examples.
Hold on. You're
one
saying
would not suffice, so there isn't one.
Listen to me. You're like, I need several examples of X. I'm like, that's great. Describe to me the qualities of X is what I'm asking right now. I'm not talking about there needs to be, I'm not saying I have hundreds of examples of this. I'm not saying any of that. All I'm asking you, Quijano, is what are the qualities of an X? What are the qualities of a transitionary fossil that make it a transitionary fossil? Because I feel like I've shown you transitionary fossils and you're like, no, it's a fucking monkey.
You haven't. So, you showed me a picture of a monkey and a person standing next to each other, bro.
So answer my question. Gianmarco, help me. Do you understand what I'm saying, at least, Gianmarco? Gianmarco, can you try to explain do you understand what I'm saying, you think?
Yes.
But you're asking me to give you examples over billions of years, which I don't
need a real example. I'm saying a hypothetical example.
What's your definition? What's your definition of a change? Meaning, if he shows a skeleton, what do you need to see in that skeleton to say this is actually a half human, half ape? You understand? Like that's what he's asking. It's like, okay, how can I? Because maybe we'll do it
hypothetically
and come back and say, hey, here, according to your parameters, this is the fossil in transition. That's what he's asking you. It's not saying
exactly. And I'm telling you the way I'm answering that, because I don't know evolution's espoused transitions over billions of years. We've used rudimentary examples of like going from a fish to something else. So what I would need is, okay, 50 billion years ago or 50 million years ago, what did you say this turned into? Perfect. Give me an example of something in between. What does that something in between look like? I don't freaking know. Give me an example of the two things that we're talking about, and then I'll make up something in between. Like that, for me, I understand the question. What the reason I'm answering the way I'm answering it is because I think that the specifics of an in-between are a little bit silly if we're talking about one thing. What I'm talking about is that if you're telling me that, and I'm going to use rudimentary examples, that it went from a single cell organism to an algae, and then it went from an algae to a sponge, then it went from a sponge to a fish, then it went from a fish to a bird. Okay, show me something that was a fish that has kind of legs, and then show me the legs getting longer, and show me a bunch of skeletons of fish with legs this long, and then fish with legs this long, and then fish with legs this long, and then fish growing wings, and then fish growing wings longer, right? Like that's what I'm talking about.
That's so subjective. Like my only point to this whole transitionary fossil thing is, I feel like this is literally my point,
Aaron. I'm explaining this, and he's not understanding this question.
No, so I don't think you're seeing the issue. Like the issue is that I could show you those things, and you'd still be like, no, those are completely different.
You said that a million times, but you've yet to show me one. I have asked you a million times to show me one, and you can't.
No, but the issue is that what you're asking me to show you I can't prove, right? Literally, what you're asking me to show you, you're saying is like, it has to be by my parameters. It kind of looks like this. It kind of has the fish finny thing, and then it kind of gets a bigger finny
did
thing.
Not give parameters for this reason. You're asking
no,
me.
The point is, since there's no parameters, I could show you literally what it is, and you'd be like, "Fuck you!" It doesn't fit the parameters. So the issue is an
go and look up this book. Go and look up this book. This is an example of what I'm talking about. This is an example.
I'm gonna end this one because like I literally can't give you what you want because you've given no parameters. I will keep showing fossils, and you're gonna keep just.
You have not shown me any fossils other than a monkey and a human. I have asked you 1,000,000 times. Show me one more.
I don't know. I don't know if we're going in circles. I can't. Here, I'm gonna stop because we're going in circles. If I don't have the parameters of what you're looking for, and you've said I'm not going to give you the parameters because there are no parameters, then at this point there's nothing I can give you. Like I could. This goes back to the example of like, let's assume evolution is true, and then I give you the fossils, and you're still like, no, fuck you, because it doesn't fit the parameters.
Yeah, you keep presenting hypotheticals. You're not presenting facts.
No, but even in the hypothetical, you would still say fuck me. That's my point. In the hypothetical,
show me one.
Okay, John.
And this is my
hypothetically show you one. Okay. Anyways,
I think it's looking for examples like this, Jonah.
Right? This is what I've said this millions of times. If you notice, he's talking in circles because you just said, "Oh, because if it doesn't meet your parameters, then it's not true." You're the only one asking for parameters. That's why I don't want to give parameters, because then you're going to use that as your additional straw man argument to say, see, you're just refuting points. What I'm saying is I don't need specifics.
Here's what I'm going to say.
What I'm saying is very simple. Hold on. What I'm saying is very simple. Show me if there's billions of years of change. To Aaron's point, there should be billions of years of examples of change. And there's not. You showed me one. You're like, well, if I show you more, you'll deny it.
So do you want to know the answer? Do you want to know the answer to why there aren't billions of examples?
This is what I'm looking for. No, we don't have to go back. This is what I'm looking for. A very rudimentary example. Very rudimentary. This is what science says happened.
No, that's not what science says happens. That's not what science says happens.
This literal book says why evolution is true. It is a book.
This is a rudimentary thing, but this isn't what science. That picture diagram is not what science says happens. A better way of explaining it is, I don't know how to explain it better than this. I'm gonna do it like this. I'm gonna use math terms because I don't know how to explain it better than this. We start with X, right? X diverges into Y and Z. It has Y and Z have characteristics from X, but Y didn't go to Z, right? So you're not going to see what you would consider transitionary fossils, it sounds like, because both of them are coming from a common ancestor that is neither fish nor human, is the way of describing it. And then they slowly change into what we now see as fish and humans. So this is probably what I should have said at the beginning. So because of that, you're not going to see what you would consider transitions, or what would look like transitions, because really it's X turning into Y and Z. It's not Y.
How long did it take for that to happen?
How long does it take for that to happen?
Yep.
Millions of years.
Perfect. So you're telling me that over that millions of years, you have an X, right? Let me see if I can get this straight on. X turning into Y, right? Well, guess what? You're going to have something that looks like an XY halfway through. That line's going to be not all the way straight. Until that changes over the course of 1,000,000 years, you're going to see something that doesn't look like an X, but it doesn't look like a Y. It looks like something between an X and a Y. And then it looks like varying measures of that.
And then I show you the monk, and then I show you humans transitioning from what looks like a monkey, and you're like, no, that isn't. So we're going in circles on this.
Yeah,
we're going in circles and we're getting nowhere. I'm okay with leaving this one here. I think we've exhausted this to the point where we're not going to get anywhere. I would recommend to Gianmarco, because I believe there's hope for Gianmarco in this. Look up how strata happens, right? Because the issue is, if evolution doesn't happen, why don't we? Keanu didn't answer this question. Why don't we see human fossils in the older rock?
That's a different question, correct?
Keanu never answered that.
Dad's question.
Yes.
It goes along with your dad's question.
So I would say eventually we'll do a second episode. We'll bring some scientist or somebody more qualified, and maybe we do a little bit more research and circle back. How's that?
Okay, here's I'm gonna throw all this out there, right? I'm gonna throw out some of these names for you guys to research. You guys can research this or not. These are some scientists, right? And I just put a couple of examples of what they put out there. Actually, that's not gonna work. Let me do their names alone. So there's one guy. There's another guy. Wait, why isn't it? And then you guys can go and research these people. You can look at this on your own. Here's what I think. And this is why I love this conversation. First and foremost, I think conversations like this are good. I don't like that this conversation didn't make any progress whatsoever. That I don't like.
I think we did make some progress.
I don't. I think we made zero progress whatsoever. Zero. None.
I admitted that I don't have any examples of the speciation within a single lifetime. I thought I had that, and then I looked at it. I'm like, oh, actually, I'm wrong. So,
Lewis, I don't agree with this, because I think that, and this is my summary, quick points, all of this. I think that for something like evolution, right? I think that the burden of proof is on the person that's espousing the theory, right? I think Aaron said that, and I think Aaron's 100% correct. And Jonah proved nothing today. Jonah proved change within species, which I already agreed with. Jonah, you've demonstrated nothing that shows transitionary. I've given you examples. I gave you more examples that science.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay. When does change within a species become so many different changes that it becomes a different species? Never? Does it just never happen where like evolution within a species would eventually change into a different species? Because you just said evolution exists within a species. So that's really interesting to me. Mm-hmm. So you agree with that dogs came from wolves, right?
I mean, I don't know the full etymology. I know that most people.
Okay, but like, I don't have to choose necessarily that one. But like, you believe that they change within species, right? Sure. Dogs and wolves are the same species, right?
Okay.
They actually are. Like a dog and a wolf can breed and then make another organism that then makes more organisms, right?
But a dog will never become a cat.
Okay, but that's not what evolution doesn't say. It's going to become a cat. It's going to become something completely different, right? Like that's the issue. So what I'm trying to let me ask the question first. So, do you think that there's evolution within a species? Do you think if that change happened in 10,000 years? Do you think if we extended that change, and I know your answer, but I'm curious, like, because you're saying that I have a filter on. I think this is your filter right now. Mm-hmm. If you think we can change a wolf into a dog, that something looks drastically different, they're technically still the same species. I'm going to give you that. Do you think over millions of years it's possible, at least, that it could change into what you would now consider a different species because it made such a drastic change in 10,000 years?
I'm going to answer this question as fair as possible. According to the scientific information that we have presented, I think that's a great question. I don't know the answer. I am not qualified to answer that question scientifically. Here's what I do believe. I do believe if that happened over the course of 1 million years, there would be significant evidence to point to of our claims. And if there's not, we should question our claims.
All right, we'll just end it there. I think we're good. I'm so tired and hungry, and I feel like we've just exhausted every single point.
I think so. Guys, I want to hear your comments. I really want to hear people's feedback, right? Like, I think we both agreed that we talked in circles and nothing was accomplished. But I really want to hear.
Nothing was accomplished. I think we really established that evolution is real. It has a ton of different evidence for it. You just don't think the evidence points to it, right? I think we very easily established that, and yeah, I think it was just very obvious the entire time. I just think you just disagree with that.
People, it's funny. I think actually more people are on your side, right? Which I'm totally okay with.
Yeah, there are.
Maybe we should have structured this by the comparative argument.
I want to make an announcement about this. I did 4 hours of research. Like Quijano is hiding
That's me.
all of you.
You know what I'm gonna do?
He's hiding it from all of you. He read the research and he's like, "Oh shit!"
I didn't finish my homework. I said this before. I didn't finish my homework because information on that is oddly hard to find.
It's part of the mainstream media.
You know what I'm gonna do, Jonah? You know what I'm gonna do? I actually partly hope that the information you presented is the only information. Because you know what I'm going to do, Jonah? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to demonstrate to you what I hope you learn to do at some point in life. I'm going to show up and I'm going to be like, you know what? As much as I want to believe X, there's no evidence to support it. So I know what my personal beliefs are, but I got to be honest. This evidence shows a different picture than my personal beliefs. So let me be clear. Here's what I think. Here's what I think now because of the evidence. I almost hope you are overwhelmingly right so I can demonstrate to you what changing your opinion on something looks like. Because I am now wondering, Jonah, if you have the ability to do that, bro.
I have changed my opinion on a lot of things. Political stuff. I used to be a huge Bernie Sanders fan. I would not vote for Bernie now. But you don't have to believe me. I'm getting tired. I love you, Quijano. Gianmarco, you're great too. This stuff is hilarious to me. Let's wrap it up.
Guys, put in the comments if you thought you learned anything. Put in the comments if you thought anything was value. Put in the comments if you think Jonah's right. I think most people are going to think you're right. Put in the comments if you think Jonah was deflecting. Put in the comments if you think I'm an idiot and I did a horrible job of presenting. Like, tell us how you really feel when we're not here, but we're still going to see it. But like, block it.
What are we talking about next week? Do we have any idea?
I don't know. We'll figure it out. Probably not something less exhausting.
But yeah, I'm tired as hell. That was exhausting.
Guys, this was awesome. I appreciate you guys. This has been a really good journey.
100%. All right, guys.
Have a good night.
Peace
Tell your mama.
out.